It's time now, ladies and gentlemen, for the introduction of our drivers for tonight's 5th Annual National Championship 3-hour Figure 8 Endurance Race. No fewer than 6 drivers in qualifications this afternoon broke the old track record, and heading them, the guy who held that old track record, starting on the pole tonight, the driver of the black car number 1 from Indianapolis, the M&M Automotive Corvette of Kenny St. John. Outside of row number 1, second starting position, just a tick of the watch slower than St. John. From Indianapolis, a 1980 Corvette, Milam Used Cars, Southside Radiator, the sponsors. Wayne Arnold in car number 12. Arnold in 12. Third starting position inside of row number 2, also from Indianapolis, the Rayburn Automobile, Hadley Electric, the sponsor of car number PH5, Ray Bray. Fourth fastest qualifier from Indianapolis, familiar to all of you who have frequented the West Side Oval, Lonnie Breedlove, who competed regularly at Raceway Park. Fifth starting position inside of row number 3, car number 2 from Indianapolis, Donnie Utterback. Sixth starting position outside of the 3rd row, also from Indianapolis, Gary Gross. The 4th row, inside of row 4, from Toledo, Ohio, a 2-time former Figure 8 world champion, Chuck Hall. 8th starting position, also from Indianapolis, the Masterpiece Lounge Camaro of Mike St. John. The 5th row, 9th starting position, from Taylor, Michigan, driving car number 9, Tom Varcell. Outside of the 5th row, car number 4 from Indianapolis, the Grayson Standard Greg & Sons Camaro of Bill Fraser. Starting 11th, car number 25 from Indianapolis, 32-year Speedrome veteran, Billy Arnold. Outside of the 6th row, 12th starting position, car number 771, another driver from the Northlands of Michigan, Billy Simmons. Starting 13th, inside of row number 7, from South Rockwood, Michigan, Gary Early. Starting 14th, car number 54, the man who finished 2nd last year to Kenny St. John, Bob Stute from Dearborn Heights, Michigan. 15th starting position, inside of row number 8 from Indianapolis, Donnie Garrigus. Starting 16th, the Schmidt Automotive Camaro. He built this machine himself, car number 7, Jim Tunney. On the inside of row number 9 from Indianapolis, 1970 Camaro, the driver of car number 01 is Joe Jackson. 18th starting position, the Southeast Auto Parts Camaro of Dave Grayson, car number 8. Starting 19th, from Louisville, Kentucky, Mike Knight in car number 96. 20th starting spot, another Michigan driver from Taylor, Michigan, car number 4A, Jack Dandy. Row number 11, from Anderson, Indiana, a veteran of the High Banks in Anderson, car number 11, Herb Rose. 22nd starting position, the Sonley's Automotive Firebird, car number 98, Bob Coffey. And in the 12th row, from Romulus, Michigan, car number 779, 23rd starting spot, Ray Gaddis. 24th starting position, the outside of row number 12, and his 74 Trans Am is Cecil Carr. Car number 98X. Well, there are your 24 starters. However, those are not the only 24 drivers who will be competing tonight. The balance of the machines will be lined up at the back gate, and when one of these drivers suffers a serious problem with his machinery of some kind, the track officials will send another driver on to take his place. So we expect to see the track full of race cars at all times during the running of tonight's 3-hour endurance race. Gentlemen, start your engines. We're ready to go. 24 cars will take the green flag. Many more will get an opportunity to go racing during this one tonight. And Larry Newber, quite an interesting field of cars. Tonight, Kenny St. John, during qualifications, clocked a lap at a 1.5 seconds faster than the figure-8 track record, a testimonial not only to the condition of the racing surface, but also to the beautiful new Dave Dayton prepared Corvette, behind the wheel of which Kenny St. John sits. And we should point out that right next to him, the winner of 37 features here at the Speedrome in 1981, Wayne Arnold, who was seriously injured in a crash just a couple of weeks ago. But those two guys are your favorites, and they sit right in that front row.
Rob, not only the stories of the racetrack and the stories of our fastest qualifiers for the 1981 event, but also it's a story of the meeting of two worlds, in a sense. Some of the top drivers from the Toledo-Detroit area, campaigning mostly at the Flat Rock Speedway in Flat Rock, Michigan, one of the suburbs just south of Detroit. That racetrack has brought to the Indianapolis Speedrome its top drivers for this event, and of course, all of the top hometown favorites. So in one sense, not only are there stories within each and every one of the cockpits, but also it's almost a battle between a couple of leagues, the Detroit area against the Indianapolis area, the two cities that actually got the automotive revolution underway in the early 1900s in this country. Both of the cities were the early automotive centers here. A lot of the cars of the 1900s and 1910s and 1920s, in addition to being constructed in Detroit, were also constructed right here in the Indianapolis area. Of course, a guy by the name of Henry Ford came along and made Detroit the motor car capital of the world, but Indianapolis, there are those who say, is certainly the automobile racing capital of the world.
We've already had a scratch, Larry, before this race even gets underway. Herb Rose from Anderson, Indiana, the driver of car number 11, did not make it to the starting grid, and that moves Jack Dawsey, who qualified 25th, into the starting lineup, and it gives him a chance to take the green flag. A totally unique racing event. 3 hours of figure-8 endurance racing. Never will a driver have an opportunity to rest or relax. There are no real straightaways per se. You can't rest at all there. You've got to be constantly on the alert for cars coming from opposite directions of you.
We will go 4 pace laps. Keep your eye on the black Pontiac Firebird pace car. When it removes itself from the speedway, we are just one final pace lap away from the start of the race. There will be a wave lap, so the fans in the grandstand area here at the Indianapolis Speedrome have a last opportunity to communicate, albeit only visually and in gestures, with the competitors on the speedway. 4 pace laps, then we go racing. Up front, 2 of the more familiar names, not only in automobile racing here in the Indianapolis area, but in all of figure-8 racing across the country. Kenny St. John and Wayne Arnold, a pair of almost identically prepared Corvette stock car race cars. Watch for them to dart away from the field when the green flag finally does unfurl.
Row number 2, also an exciting row with some super lightweight outlaw stock cars. This race is called an outlaw stock car race, meaning that the restrictions and rules are very limited in nature. But if we look back to the 3rd row, we see a couple of pro stock automobiles. Ladies and gentlemen, on your feet this time around. Let's wave these guys on their way. Godspeed and the best of luck. The bravest race drivers in the world in probably one of the world's most grueling and dangerous races right here in Indianapolis at the Speedrome. Who knows how many laps will complete in the next 3 hours? Many people speculate it could be in excess of 500 laps around this oval. Figure-8 tonight.
Row number 4, the fastest qualifier of the visitors, Chuck Hall out of Toledo, Ohio. He is a former 2-time champion of the World Figure-8 race at Islip, New York. He was 3rd in this event a year ago. He'll sit on the inside of the 4th row. He'll be flanked in his outside by young Mike St. John, the younger brother of our pole setter, Kenny St. John. That is row number 4, anticipating green flag on this lap. Flagman Carl Hall watches the field as it motors slowly, coming out of the figure-8, the apex of the 8 that's on the north side of this racetrack. Now St. John and Arnold bring the cars down to the south end of the speedway through what is known as turns 4 and 3 if this were oval racing, but for figure-8 racing, it's just reversed. That'll be turns 3 and 4. Here they come, St. John and Arnold, anticipating green flag this time around. Aerial fireworks signify the final moments before this race gets underway. Arnold and St. John begin to accelerate out of turn number 1. Now turn number 4, rather, the figure 8. We've got a green flag into the number 1 corner. Kenny St. John grabs the early lead, and car number 1, Wayne Arnold, moves in the number 2 position in the PH number 5 car. Ray Bray grabs third, and right away the first 3 cars begin to open up some distance between themselves and the rest of the field.
3 Dayton prepared stock cars in this one at the green flag as St. John and Arnold choose opposite courses through the crossover that time. The third car, driven by Lonnie Breedlove, who started in row number 2, immediately drops back to 7th position. And Larry Newber 1 lap into this one, and already action in the crossover. Wayne Arnold in the lead and beginning to stretch it would appear over St. John. Now it's when timing becomes of the essence.
Well, when you start 24 cars, it's bound to be a very short period of time before you begin to get some confusion. At the crossroads of America here, continuing to lead is Arnold in car number 12. Arnold has opened up a pretty comfortable distance, although there's a long, long ways to go, and Rob Albright, already the scoring headache has begun.
It certainly has. Chuck Hall, his 6-cylinder Camaro, has moved into 2nd position. Ray Bray is 3rd, and Kenny St. John, in what would have to be construed as a shaky start, has dropped to 4th. St. John, in fact, did get briefly together with another machine in the crossover, and for a minute it looked like it might be a very short race for Kenny St. John. Wayne Arnold so far having no problems whatsoever as he continues to build upon his early lead.
Well, one thing to keep in mind here is that an early lead is almost meaningless, because the idea here is to finish the race. It really makes very little difference how many laps you lead, particularly in the first hour of this race. Remember, we are not going a prescribed number of laps. This race is based on time. It will be a 3-hour event. And not only is speed important, but finishing, endurance, and strategy becomes very significant. And don't forget to count out all those people from the Detroit-Toledo area. All of them are veterans in this type of racing. They have competed in these endurance races before, and even though they may not be among the early race leaders right now, watch for them to be in there, certainly near the end of this race.
Larry, a couple of peculiarities as they regard to this race here at the Speedrome, and that is this, that yellow flags do not mean that you slow down and bunch up. A yellow simply means that somebody has had some problem on the racetrack, and that you should be alert for that. Other places around the track you can run at racing speed, and you do not have to maintain your position under a yellow. The only laps that will not count in this race is when the red flag comes out. That brings the machine to a complete halt, and the time will stop. So we'll have 3 hours of green and yellow flag racing in this event. Your leader is now Chuck Hall in car number 5, and as we mentioned that, Wayne Arnold pulls back alongside in car number 12. We talked about Kenny St. John getting a shaky start, but that man knows what he's doing. He's back into 4th position and right with your lead pack. It's Chuck Hall, Wayne Arnold, Ray Bray, Kenny St. John is 5th, and they're running in that order. The top 4 machines right together, a 6-cylinder leading the pack, and 3 big bore V8 Outlaw stockers trailing him.
And one of the people who's had problems early on in the race here is a guy that we had just begun to watch in car number 771, Billy Simmons. He started this race back in about 12th position, had improved his position by about 4, and had moved up to 8th and appeared to be making a move toward the front. Billy Simmons, the son of one of the most legendary figure-8 drivers of all time, Little Richard Simmons, and Billy has backed into the infield area here at the Speedrome in turns 3 and 4 of the figure-8 course, and is sitting silently in the infield. Perhaps Simmons is out of it already.
Well, it looks interesting. I wouldn't call him out. He has come to a stop in the infield, maybe waiting for an opportunity to move into the pit area, but that machine has come to a complete halt in the infield. That's got to be a disappointment. As we look down over the field in the running order of these machines, what fascinates me, Larry, is that you have a wide range of types of machinery. You have the $20,000 Outlaw stockers, and then you have machines ranging down in price to perhaps $1,500 to $2,000, and those are the modified stock cars, and a couple of those, in fact, running near the front of the pack.
And if you look up and down this field, you also see that aerodynamics has worked its way into figure-8 racing. Yes, even figure-8 racing. most of the cars that are running near the front, matter of fact, all those with the exception of the current leader, Chuck Hall, have either an aerofoil or a car that is actually designed with aerodynamics in mind from the ground up. The race car that Lonnie Breedlove, for instance, is driving is nothing more than a modified wedge like we used to see running at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway in the early 1970s. The car is very similar in appearance, as a matter of fact, to the STP wedges of Andy Granatelli. The driver's cockpit is even offset to the left. Of course, that is there primarily for racing when he runs on the traditional ovals, where all you do is turn to the left. But Breedlove here, turning right and turning left, that offset may not be that much of an advantage. The leaders, Rob, in very heavy traffic.
Well, Larry, they'll stay that way just about the entirety of the evening. I look down into the pit area now, and I see the track officials motioning another car out onto the racetrack. So this is the kind of thing we'll be watching for all night long. It looks like car number 60A, Luby Allen from Taylor, Michigan, now getting an opportunity to join the race. When one of the machines is damaged to what appears to be an extent too serious to continue, another car will be added. 57 machines make qualifying runs this afternoon. We've got a lot of them sitting in the pit area, chomping at the bit and waiting an opportunity to get out on the racetrack. Your leader continues to be Chuck Hall in car number 5, closely pursued by number 12, Wayne Arnold. Third is Kenny St. John in the black car number 1. Fourth is Ray Bray in PH5. Lonnie Breedlove now has fought his way back to 5th in car number 0. Sixth is 4, Bill Fraser. And now one of the machines is spun right in front of your leaders. That's the younger brother of Kenny St. John, Mike St. John, who was one of the fastest qualifiers and was running very, very well up to that point in the race.
Well, as you watch the action at the crossover, or the X, or the center of the figure 8, whatever you choose to call it, you can see that there are several, and whoa, some real close action in the X at this point. There are several ways of maneuvering through that particularly dangerous part of this racetrack. You know, you don't always have to drive straight. You'll see some of the competitors from time to time turning their race car at almost 45-degree angle to their intended direction of travel simply to avoid a collision. Obviously, that cost you valuable time. You just saw the number 43 car of Donnie Garrigus make that kind of maneuver we were talking about. Then, of course, there's always the easy way out, and that's to brake or maybe even stop at the crossover. And, Rob, that's something that the top drivers just don't like to do they?
No, they certainly don't. And I've talked to just about all of the speedrome drivers about their strategy in regards to this race. And what might surprise you a little bit, what Wayne Arnold and Kenny St. John saw as the biggest advantage they had with their outlaw stalkers was not necessarily the fact that they could negotiate the track so much faster. They referred primarily, Larry, to their ability to make the quick move through the crossover, that they could punch that throttle, get immediate response, and that is what they saw as their strongest advantage, that they could keep themselves out of trouble with those machines as opposed to simply flying around the racetrack. They saw that as of secondary importance. And while we speak, Wayne Arnold has moved back into the lead in car number 12. I think we'll see this kind of jockeying for position among your leaders all night long, kind of playing a wait-and-see game, watching the competition, hanging in there, trying to keep your machine out of trouble. Dave Grayson spinning in car number 8. He's underway once again, and another couple of machines spinning. It's Gary Early in 09, and one of our front runners, Ray Bray, in PH5. Bray was running 4th at the time of his spin. He's underway again, but he's given up a good 2/3 of a lap to your front-running pack, and as he waits for a chance to move through the crossover, your lead group comes right in behind him. Now Kenny St. John, who started on the pole and had dropped back, has asserted himself once more and is out in front in car number 1. It's Kenny St. John, the leader, and now Bob Coffey is spun in car number 98. So apparently, Larry, the racetrack pretty slippery at this point.
Well, of course, now we have a car leaving the pit, or rather leaving the racetrack area, going back into the pit area. That does not mean, again, that he has been eliminated from this race. Rob, you started talking about track conditions, and that certainly will become a factor as this race wears on. Remember, we're only 8 minutes into 180 minutes of racing, and you know as well as I do, just from driving your pleasure car around the streets, when you park it in the garage at home at night, it drops liquid, and you don't even abuse that car nearly as hard as the drivers will be abusing the cars here. Not only does oil and water get on the racetrack, but a certain amount of the rubber from the tires of these race cars is laid down on top of the blacktop surface. And as that rubber heats up, it becomes considerably more slippery than what the normal racetrack is. Car number 9 pulling to the pit area.
I believe
Tom
that was
Barzel.
Right, and it looked like the rear end loose in that machine, the entire transaxle unit in the back of that car, so that could spell the end for him.
And Barzel was running in the top 10. Tom was one of the early people in the top 5. He had dropped off the pace just a little bit. The pace that Chuck Hall has been setting as he continues to lead this race. Hall right now is working on trying to put a lap on Ray Bray. Bray, you remember, was as high as 4th position in this race in that PH number 5 or PH5, and right now is the entire distance of the racetrack behind the leader, car number 5, Chuck Hall.
Larry, just 29 laps into this race, and already I don't think either one of us with any degree of authority could go back more than about 5 positions deep, if that far at all. Wayne Arnold is your leader in car number 12. Behind him is Kenny St. John in the black number 1. Unofficially, well, apparently it's Chuck Hall who is your leader, and Chuck beginning to move away a little bit. I had ignored the fact that Chuck had moved well out in front. Arnold is second, St. John is third in car number 1, and fourth it would appear to be Lonnie Breedlove in car number 0. And I'll tell you, Breedlove almost took it in the crossover that time through.
Well, the latest competitor to be added to the field because of the withdrawal of another driver is Dean Griffin. Now, Dean is one of the regulars here at the Indianapolis Speedrome, the only driver to score points on all 26 nights of the 1981 Speedrome Pro Stock competition. So he's a guy who knows this racetrack pretty well. The car number is 97. It's a 1967 Firebird, and he joins the fray. And what a fray it is. Right now we have a pack of cars, about 12 or 14 strong, and they meet a pack of about 6 or 8 at the Speedrome. Something's got to give, and a lot of people hit the brakes hard, but nobody made contact.
Your 3 front runners all had to jump on the binders to avoid problems in the crossover. And what's happened now, it's given Wayne Arnold and Kenny St. John a chance to close on your leader, Chuck Hall. So those 3 machines, the 3 front runners, 33 laps into the race, still right together on the racetrack. Again, Hall forced to slow for the crossover, and Wayne Arnold uses that brief opportunity to pull alongside. So the 2 front runners, Arnold and Hall, now side by side. Those 3 machines run 1, 2, 3, 4th is car number 0, Lonnie Breedlove. And unofficially in 5th position would be Bill Fraser in the black car number 4. I believe, Larry, those are the only automobiles on the lead lap, and just as soon as the scorers can get caught up, we'll confirm that. We do know the front 3 are Chuck Hall, Kenny St. John, and Wayne Arnold. Now track officials going to work in the pit area again, authorizing another machine apparently to move out onto the racetrack. Cars continue to drop out and have problems. What was incredible about last year's race, Larry, with 478 laps complete, the second place car, a scant 2 laps down to your eventual winner. So that kind of thing could develop despite all kinds of action on the racetrack and red flags, pit action, and so on.
Rob, we also want to make mention of a guy who was added to this race at the 11th hour, so to speak, Jack Dawsey, in an orange-yellow trim number 6 car. He was the 25th fastest qualifier this afternoon among the almost 60 cars that qualified, and Dawsey started this race in last position, and just as we begin to speak about him, he loses valuable moments at the crossover, coming to a stop there. But Dawsey has been running very competitively and very consistently since the drop of the green flag. And unofficially, we got him running near the top 10. He had lost very little ground prior to the last couple of laps and had worked his way through the field and was running up near the leaders at one point in this race. Now we have a car against the fence. In the number 4,
Larry, that's Jack Dandy, who has spun, another one of the visitors from Michigan. One of the guys expected to run up near the front. He's had problems. Now number 09, Gary Early, leaves the track with a flat right front tire. He'll move into the pit area very quickly, change racing rubber, and rejoin the race.
Well, early in the car, 09 is from South Rockwood, Michigan, another of those suburbs of Detroit. And the attrition here, about 15 minutes into the race, seems to be affecting the people who have driven the most number of miles to get to this race.
Again, your leaders in heavy traffic. It's still Chuck Hall setting the pace. He's alternated with Wayne Arnold and Kenny St. John in that posture. Now he is out in front of a great group of automobiles and more or less in the clear, but shortly that will turn to traffic, and that is crossover type traffic. So you not only have to worry about traffic headed the same direction that you are, but traffic is coming at you from a 90-degree angle.
Car number 20, Bill Horn, you'll be able to pick it out on the racetrack. It's one of the two untainted cars on the speedway. A 1979 Trans Am has been added to the field with the retirement of one of the other competitors, Bill Horn. This car has been rebuilt in the last couple of days after a figure-8 rollover in practice. So there's good reason for the primer. Now, that's not the primer car that's sitting at the crossover right now. That's the car number 01 of Joe Jackson, a guy who at one point was a regular on the very high-speed 5/8 mile paved oval on the other side of Indianapolis, Indiana, the Indianapolis Raceway Park. Chuck Hall continues to lead, but being hotly pursued by Wayne Arnold and Kenny St. John, both of them certainly well within striking distance, continuing to cautiously pick their way through slower traffic. The speeds will drop down to the area of 35 to 40 miles an hour across, or around rather, the tight corners here at the speedrome, but they'll pick up to almost 60 or 70 miles an hour as the competitors barrel off the number 4 and the number 2 corners on the figure-8 course and head for the X in the middle of the infield.
Larry, most figure-8 features in outlaw stock car racing at the speedrome, 50 laps in duration. As one of your two front-running cars, Chuck Hall darts between 01 Joe Jackson and 25 Billy Arnold as he slices through the crossover. It's very close, or it appeared to us to be a close call. But you know, that might not be the case. These drivers know what they're doing on the racetrack and make those moves, and we might think it's carelessness on their part. It paid off for Chuck Hall. He's back into third position now. Your leader is Wayne Arnold in car number 12. Second is Chuck Hall. Running third is Kenny St. John in the black car number 1. Billy Arnold trying to get his car number 25 off the racetrack. Now he has done that. He and Dean Griffin both move into the pit area simultaneously. The pit, Larry, really becomes in this race a part of the racetrack. And I'll tell you, it's a dangerous place to be to stand and watch a race. Gary Lee is down there, and just as soon as Gary has a report of some of the action that he's seen already in the pit area, we'll be going down to Gary for his observation.
The man who was the leading money winner, or I should say is the leading money winner at this racetrack for the current season, Wayne Arnold, the all-time leading money winner, of course, Kenny St. John, but the man who won more money this year at the Indianapolis Speedrome than anybody, Wayne Arnold, has begun to put a little bit of distance between himself and the second-place car of Chuck Hall and the third-place car of Kenny St. John. They have also lapped once one of their most significant competitors, Lonnie Breedlove, in the aerodynamically designed silver number 0. So Breedlove drops a lap down to the 3 lead cars, at least, here in the early stages of the race.
Another machine has been added to the race. Car number 91, Kerry Haskett. His 1979 Camaro now moves on to the racetrack. He was the 28th fastest qualifier. He now gets an opportunity to compete. Gary finished 7th in last year's 3-hour endurance race and expected to do well here tonight. He'll be fighting out of something of a deficit, as he already has 53 laps to make up. That's how many your leaders have completed. Still Wayne Arnold setting the pace in the orange Corvette car number 12. We look several car lengths back and we find Kenny St. John riding in second position in the black car number 1. Third is the red and white number 5 of Chuck Hall, and those are the only 3 cars still on the lead lap. The only machines that have completed 55 laps.
If you're familiar with pavement racing, of course, you know that one of the major factors is tires. Well, tires should not be a major factor in this race. A lot of the top contenders are using very professionally designed and high-cost racing slick tires, the kind that are used in the high-speed ovals around the country, and they really don't figure that those tires are going to wear out at these speeds even for this number of laps. Now, everybody will have to pit probably at least twice for fuel, and when they do pit, there will be an opportunity, of course, at that time to change tires should it be necessary. So even though tires so often play a role in the outcome of a race, here it really shouldn't be a factor. That is, of course, unless you get caught at the crossover and a collision flattens one or more of your tires, it's pretty difficult to run at a high speed with flat tires in the race car.
Larry, we've had another lead change. Kenny St. John, car number 1, tonight's fastest qualifier, back out in front as he's gotten around Wayne Arnold. Arnold is second, and St. John looks like he's really moving away from Arnold. Chuck Hall still third in car number 5, and a couple of machines together in the crossover. It's car number A60, Luby Allen, and number 4, Jack Dandy. And Dandy tries to circle around and does so right in front of some traffic. We nearly had a problem. One of the machines appears to have lost a fuel tank right out in the middle of the racetrack.
Well, we now do have a predicament. We have a race car with just a little bit of fuel in the lines that lead from the trunk of the car, or what used to be the trunk, to the engine, and when that fuel burns out, he won't have any left. The red flag does come out. We have a fuel tank emptying itself, emptying its contents right here in front of what usually is the start-finish line, but it's actually about the equivalent of the backstretch on the figure-8 course.
Watch what happens now, Larry. You'll see every operable automobile moving off the racetrack. They're all headed back to the pit area, perhaps for tire changes to top off the fuel tanks, maybe to provide their drivers an opportunity to rest just a bit and perhaps get a drink of something cold. They'll be back into the pit area and momentarily, once that mess is cleaned up, where strangely one of the machines lost a fuel tank. I believe it was the number 4 of Jack Dandy that has apparently some bent suspension parts in the front of that automobile. He's now having difficulty getting off the racetrack. Well, the race isn't over, fans, so don't go home. 61 laps complete, 21.09 minutes complete. You'll see now that the clock has come to a complete stop and will remain so until the green flag comes out once again. 21 minutes and 9 seconds of 3 hours have been completed. Your leader, Kenny St. John, has completed 61 laps.
All right. A 3-time champion of the National 3-Hour Enduro Figure 8, Kenny St. John. Obviously, you're starting on the pole, so the strategy has got to be just get out in front and stay there.
Yeah, of course, 3-hour Enduro like this is awful long and time and laps, but we like to start up front where we can see where we're going and just try to develop a rhythm after it gets started.
Obviously, it's easier to drive against guys that you know well, guys that you race against every week. But this has a big purse. We have guys coming in here that you haven't seen for a while. That has to be difficult.
Oh, that makes the timing factor a lot more critical, but we just try to race much like we would any race. The only real big difference we go with on this is it's just going to be about 550 laps where we got to figure.
And that's better than 1,000 times through that crossover.
Yeah, it's necessary. You're going to have to go 0 for 1,000, I'm pretty sure.
What kind of money do you guys have wrapped up in your race car?
My car's not owned by myself. It's owned by Emerson Brothers and Keats. They're sponsored by M&M Automotive, and they've got approximately $25,000.
Which to many viewers is just incredible, because I can recall not that many years ago, the cars racing on the Figure 8 were jalopies, for the lack of a better term, that didn't cost but maybe $500 to $1,000 to build, and you guys are out there with $25,000 race cars.
Well, I wish the $500 and $1,000 days were back, but if you got to win, you have to open that checkbook up.
Of course, right now, though, when you take the checkered flag, you get a little bit more as well.
Oh, yeah, it works out on both ends. Everything's relative. It just costs more to go in a hole, I guess.
You're keeping the bills paid.
Oh, yeah, we've been done real well this summer. We're real happy.
The Bamboo Inn, right?
Yeah, Bamboo Inn. That's Bill and Anna Darks from 10th and Shaylin here in Indianapolis. They've been helping us with the bills a little bit.
Starting on the pole, position number 1 from qualifying, Kenny St. John. Good luck, Kenny.
Thank you, Gary.
leader once again, Kenny St. John, with Wayne Arnold second in car number 12. The other machine on the... So just as soon as we sort out and see who's able to rejoin the race, we'll fill that racetrack once again with 24 racing machines. Your leader once again, Kenny St. John, with Wayne Arnold second in car number 12. The other machine on the lead lap and right behind Arnold is car number 5, Chuck Hall. And then fourth, one lap down, number 0, Lonnie Breedlove. Also a lap down is Ray Bray in PH5. One machine among your leaders that has not come back out of the pit area is number 0, Lonnie Breedlove. Car number 11, Herb Rose, who was scheduled to be one of the 24 original starters and was scratched, now has his machine put back together and he's back on the racetrack. No confirmation as to what the problem might have been with that automobile, but Rose now back on the racetrack in car number 11. We still do not see number 0, Lonnie Breedlove.
Some of the other competitors, Rob, who were among those in the starting lineup who have not had difficulty in this event yet, who continue to be out on the racetrack. Car number 7, now these people are not among the leaders. Jim Tunney, he was the 1979 National Figure 8 champion. He's been out all evening with no difficulties being encountered. The number 1M of Mike St. John. And now we have a couple of cars colliding at the crossover in the center of the racetrack, and they are connected together, and this could be a problem. Both the drivers right now sitting in the machines trying to figure some way of extricating themselves from one another.
Well, Larry, car number 95, Fred Deal, had just moved out of the pit area. He doesn't even make it half a straightaway before being hit by another car from behind, and what a disappointing and short racing evening for car number 95, and quickly we go back red after running 60 laps without any problems. On lap number 60, we go red, and once more on lap number 63. Fred Deal obviously okay, the driver of car number 95, but we saw him working hard in the pit area, was unable to get his machine together in time for the start. Now he has it together.
Wayne Arnold is a 3-time track champion here at the Speedrome, but by golly, you haven't taken the checkered flag yet in the 3-hour National Figure 8 Enduro, so what's the strategy for this evening?
Well, we're just going to try to stay in there. Last year we was running a little out-of-class car. We wrecked a good one, you know, the night before the Enduro. So last night we kept her together, and maybe we can keep her together all night tonight.
Now, you have a problem the other drivers don't have in that you're really recovering from an accident a couple of weeks ago in a stock car, which caused you some broken bones or broken ribs, a separated shoulder. So what will that do as far as hanging on for 3 hours?
Well, I got a little pain in the oval last night, but I didn't get long enough time to run the 8, but what time I did, it felt pretty good, and I've felt pretty good all day in practice. If it don't get to bother me, I'll be all right. If it does, I've got Jim Fox. He's going to relief drive for me, so I think we'll be okay. He's won it once, so maybe we can bring the car in if I can't get in.
On a Figure 8 course, you guys are going through the crossover every 13, 14 seconds. Is there any spot on the race course where you can rest?
No, not with the cars that we're running nowadays. You know, the pro stockers, you can rest down the chutes, but these cars that we're running now, the vets, they just get you down the chute so fast that you're having to hold on all the time.
And of course, I would think, having grown up from what we would call jalopies many years ago to the very high-priced, high-powered cars today, that you can really get yourself out of trouble with the throttle as opposed to going for the brake.
Well, yeah, throttle means a lot of getting through the crossover. If you look over and you see that you got a man out-parred coming off one corner going through the crossover, you know, you can out-par him and beat him there, and it helps a bunch instead of having a slow one and you don't know how you're going in.
Is there ever a problem, say, after 2 hours of racing where the mind begins to wander off and to some other area and perhaps you lose your concentration?
Well, some drivers have that problem. That's the difference from good race drivers and bad race drivers. When you start daydreaming, you wreck them. And that's the main thing. You got to hold control over yourself.
Qualified for the second starting position outside the front row, car number 12. Thank you, Wayne Arnold.
Thank you.
As we anticipate the green flag one more time from Speedway starter Carl Hall, we remind you of some of the competitors who remain in the pit area. The crews working on the cars. Jack Dandy, the guy who lost the fuel tank, has estimated it'll be about 15 more minutes, but he'll be back out there. Wayne Arnold, who did some repairs on the race car during this red flag, has returned, and Lonnie Breedlove has finally come back out. Lonnie Breedlove has been in the pits about 10 to 12 minutes clock time, but he's actually only lost about 2 or 3 minutes on the racetrack. Again, we remind you, in case you just joined us, that this is the race that's being run by the clock rather than by the number of laps. So Breedlove, having lost 2 to 3 minutes of racing time on the speedway, may not have lost as many laps as he might have in a traditional race.
Back to green once again, and the three-car duel shapes up between Arnold, St. John, and Chuck Hall. And as Wayne Arnold's crew said, we'll have to keep an eye on Wayne Arnold to see just how strong car number 12 is running.
The latest entry to the fray, car number 43. He'll run as 43X because he has the same car number as another competitor, Donnie Garrigus, is Bob Cloud in a 1971 Firebird powered by a Chevrolet-powered engine. Cloud is the only active driver in the United States to run in the very first figure-8 race at the Indianapolis Speedrome.
Larry, as we look down on the racetrack, we expected Wayne Arnold and Kenny St. John to bolt away from the pack. They have not done that. Now, I haven't put a clock on your two front runners, but it appears to me they're running a little bit slower than they were early in the race. And once again, maybe a little of that psychological strategizing going on the racetrack. At least that's what it appears to be.
Well, Rob, you know, there are two things that are going to take a lot of wear and tear during this event. The race car is one and the driver is another one. And I tell you, as a competitor, you have to have a pretty good handle on exactly what type of physical shape that you're in and exactly what can you withstand over a 3-hour period. And as we have seen already with 3 red flags here in the early going, the race itself will actually take a little more than 3 hours. It's going to be 3 hours plus, and so it's very possible that St. John and Arnold at this point are well aware of the fact that they lead this race. They have at least a 1-lap lead on every competitor except Chuck Hall. Chuck Hall is not exactly knocking at the door right now. And so, Rob, I think you're exactly right. I think that they are just pacing themselves more than just a little bit.
While we've been watching the action develop on the racetrack, Ray Bray in car number PH5 has unlapped himself from your leader. So he now moves into the lead lap, and another red flag can certainly help Ray Bray. If you remember, Larry, he spun early in the going, and at the time was really among your front runners. So that machine's capable of running out in front. And now he's gotten around both Arnold and St. John and runs in the lead lap. Chuck Hall has fought his way through some traffic after the red flag. He's third, and he now runs with your lead pack. It's Wayne Arnold, Kenny St. John, Chuck Hall, and on the same lap, but nearly a lap down, Ray Bray in car number PH5.
Well, about 1/6 of the way into this race, or 60 laps complete after about 30 minutes of competition. This goes back a few minutes. We could give you a rundown. We've already talked about the first 5. Of course, St. John leading the race. Running in second position was Hall. At that particular point, Wayne Arnold was third. Fourth, 1 lap down, was Ray Bray. Fifth in the car number 0 was Lonnie Breedlove before that long pit stop. In sixth position, the car number 54, who was in the starting lineup, Bob Stute, when this race began. Remember, he finished second in this race a year ago. Stute was 1 lap down, or rather 2 laps down to the leaders. In seventh position, in car number 7, was Jim Tunney. Eighth in car number 32 was Gary Gross. Gross had started this race in 7th position. Ninth in car number 2 was Donnie Utterback. In 10th, in car number 6 was Jack Dossey Jr., the guy who was added to the field late in the, just before the green flag dropped.
Lonnie Breedlove having some problems in car number 0. Remember, he had the brake rotor replaced. Larry, we're seeing some smoke like a plume from the tail of number 12, Wayne Arnold. I don't know if that's an indication of anything serious, but it isn't good news, obviously, because we haven't seen that happen to him before. Don't know if the problem is of any major nature. He's moving ahead of everybody now, but I don't like the looks of that smoke trailing car number 12.
Well, Rob, it appears to come just as he tromps on the accelerator initially. Once he gets the car up to racing speed, at least for that particular vehicle, the smoke does seem to disappear, but when he touches the throttle, the smoke appears.
Wayne Arnold is your leader. Chuck Hall has gotten around Kenny St. John for second position. Kenny runs third, and we've got a bumper, Larry, laying out in the middle of the racetrack, very near the crossover. Apparently, one of the machines has now gone over it. Gary Early has run over that bumper, and rather than getting past it, it's attached itself to the bottom of his race car, and he's now dragging it around and trailing some sparks. Now he goes back into the pit area. I'll bet Gary doesn't even realize what the problem is, but he can probably hear or feel something is amiss in his machine.
Well, he gave us a nice show for at least a couple of seconds, brightened up the speedway for a little bit as a lot of sparks came from underneath the Gary Early race car. Another one of those drivers from the Detroit area. Now, despite the smoke, Wayne Arnold continues to put distance now between himself and the second and third place cars. Arnold has about a half a lap lead, Rod, over St. John and Chuck Hall.
Well, after they paced themselves and ran side by side for a few circuits prior to the dropping of the green flag once again, didn't look like either St. John or Arnold with much of a chance to establish a big lead, but now Wayne Arnold has done just that. He stretched his advantage to half a lap over Chuck Hall and Kenny St. John. I don't know whether he was driving slowly, wondering whether or not his machine capable of going fast or what was going on, but he now is really moving despite the fact that he continues to show a trail of smoke. Now the second and third place cars come through the crossover, and that time Kenny St. John got through the X right in front of Wayne Arnold. Let's see, we can tell now this time through who's moving quicker. St. John gets through just a bit earlier. Shortly, however, Chuck Hall and Kenny St. John will be in some very heavy traffic. Wayne Arnold now with just two cars in front of him before he's got perhaps 500 or 600 feet of clear racing surface. Still Wayne Arnold setting the pace with Chuck Hall second. Kenny St. John third in the black car number 1. Fourth a lap down is Ray Bray in PH5.
Rob, you know, we might spend a couple of minutes and talk about what happens when you enter that crossover. A few minutes ago, we discussed the various routes you can take as you go through the X in the middle of the racetrack. Obviously, the most direct route is to stay on the line or the flow of traffic where the new pavement is and continue on that straight line. You can take that 45-degree angle turn, but a lot of things happen as you cross the crossover. First of all, you have to be concerned about the drivers on both sides of you, trying to anticipate what move they have to make to get over the crossover successfully. Not only do you have to have good peripheral vision, but you have to have a pretty good grasp of the performance of the race car. Being able to predict exactly how much throttle you have left as you enter the crossover so that you know whether or not that car is going to lurch when you stand on the accelerator is a big part of it. You really have to know the equipment. It may look like just a hell bent for leather style, but you have to think all the time and remember exactly how much you got left, how much of that throttle pedal you've already used by the time you get there.
Larry, you've hit the nail right on the head. A knowledge of equipment is paramount. Not only your own vehicle, but your competition. I think if there's one advantage that the local speedrome drivers have, it's the fact that a Wayne Arnold or a Kenny St. John, as opposed to a Chuck Hall, can see as they approach the crossover who is approaching from the opposite angle. And they know whether or not that driver has a great amount of throttle ability in his car and what his typical driving characteristics are. They know which drivers are probably going to have a tendency to just remain under full power. They know which drivers will have a tendency to brake, which drivers move right and which move left. It's also a bit of strategy, and I think it takes a great deal of intelligence for these drivers to very quickly become familiar with their competition, the guys that they're not accustomed to running alongside, and anticipating what that other fellow might do. So in addition to knowing the capabilities of your own equipment, you've got to know what the other guy's equipment is capable of and what he is likely to do as a race driver. So I think in that respect, you've certainly sized the situation up. Your leaders now encountering a lot of action in the crossover. Both of them making those kinds of wide moves that you talked about. I think they'd rather do that and take a little longer route than to hit the brakes. That is the last recourse, because then you have to regain momentum. It's still Wayne Arnold out in front with Kenny St. John second and Chuck Hall third. But Arnold now seeming to be picking up just a bit more ground on your second and third place machines.
Well, the real danger point in a figure-8 race comes after you've had a long period of green flag racing, because what occurs is that the field strings out. And what happens at that point then, the field on the racetrack suddenly covers the entire speedway, and there are no breaks in the action, so to speak. There are no large gaps between cars, and there is a constant almost collision, or at least a constant blending of the traffic at the crossover. So it's a long green flag like this that really brings about the real dangerous part of figure-8 racing. When the field strings out, covers the whole racetrack, there's never a dull moment at the center of the speedway.
Larry, we've passed the 1/6 mark of this race, a little over 30 minutes complete. I noticed the number of laps completed and the amount of time at 30 minutes, 1/6 of the way through. Your leader, Wayne Arnold, had completed 85 laps. If you multiply that by 6, theoretically, Wayne Arnold could complete 510 laps over the course of 3 hours. Last year's winner, Kenny St. John, completed 478. We did make mention of the fact that your fastest 2 qualifiers a second and a half faster than last year's track record time. So almost assuredly more than 478 laps will be completed by your leader. And if that pace holds true for the first 6 of the race, maybe over 500, as many as 510. Bill Fraser has gone into the pit area in car number 4 under the green. That has to be an unscheduled stop for Bill. One of the real front runners in pro stock racing, and we expected him, despite the fact that he's running with a machine far less in horsepower, far less money invested than Arnold and St. John. We still anticipated him to run up near the front. And Jack Dawsey has spun in the north end of the racetrack. The Camaro that you talked about earlier has had a problem in car number 6. Fortunately, he spins in some open area, is able to turn the machine around and rejoin the race.
We were talking about Frazier a couple of seconds ago, Rob. He was the highest finisher last year from the Indianapolis area outside of the winner, St. John. So Frazier, who finished 5th in 1980, he was the 1981 Pro Stock runner-up here at the Speedway. Certainly figured to do pretty well here tonight, but as you pointed out, has made an unscheduled pit stop.
Another one of the guys we ought to take a look at. I'm not sure how he's doing at this point. Seems to be running very smoothly as Fraser rejoins the race. Car number 2, Donnie Utterback, a seasoned veteran of the Speedrome, is driving the machine that Wayne Arnold piloted to the Pro Stock Points Championship in 1981. The Firebird car number 2 does not have the horsepower, obviously, some of these other outlaw machines, but still a very capable race car. Donnie, during qualifications, had problems in the early going as third place Chuck Hall almost has a real collision in the crossover. He manages to get through, but it was a tense moment for Chuck Hall, and he's given up a lap now to your leader, Wayne Arnold. Four cars together down in the north end of the racetrack, including Bill Fraser in car number 4, Ray Bray in PH5. It looks like car number 7, Jim Tunney, 97, Dean Griffin, and number 2 that we were just speaking about, Donnie Utterback. So several of the drivers that we've talked a lot about tonight got together, and they've all gotten through it. Ray Bray, the only machine unable to restart. Ray still working on his car as he coasts backward out of harm's way. And we've now reached, Larry, the 100 lap mark. Of course, laps insignificant, except for the fact the guy who completes the most of them is going to win, and a couple more cars together. It's Ray Gaddis in 779, another one of the Michigan drivers, who gets together with another vehicle and slides into the stalled machine of Ray Bray.
Well, Bray has got to be wondering where he can go to hide, Rob. I tell you, he has certainly been one of the 4 fastest cars on this track all evening during this figure-8 endurance race. He's had all kinds of problems. Now he's involved in a 4-car crash, as at the other end of the speedway, the south end, we have 2 more competitors coming together. The 09 car of Gary Early, he's been in the pits. He lost several laps down there earlier. He continues to sit sideways in the south end of the speedway. And Bray is still without power here in turn number 3 of the figure-8 course. A guy who was as high as 3rd position in this race at one time. The car simply failed to restart after that 5-car crash about 4 laps ago.
Well, the machine that got together with Ray Gaddis, 779, and slid into Ray Bray, the same car that tangled with Gary Early just a half lap later. We're still running under the yellow. And the machine, look, Larry, the north end of the racetrack completely barren at that one particular moment in time. almost an eerie silence for just a brief period as the machines are all tightly bunched together on the racetrack. It's still Arnold out in front. St. John has closed his margin, but St. John with more cars to negotiate. Red flag comes out once again on lap number 104. The first guy to see it and move into the pit area, car number 1, Kenny St. John.
And Rob, I'll tell you, you can really tell the veterans in this type of racing, as soon as that red flag came out, all the guys who are used to this type of endurance racing immediately, regardless of where they were on the racetrack, darted to the pit area. They wasted no time. You can see a lot of the competitors are stuck in the infield area right now. They're losing valuable time that could be utilized to repair their race cars, put more fuel in, maybe change a tire. But the veterans who are used to this type of racing, they knew exactly what to do. Wherever they were on that racetrack, they made an immediate beeline toward the pit area.
A two-time track champion on the oval at Raceway Park. Lonnie Breedlove, this is a long way from the oval, so can you tell us what type of experience you can draw from when you move to the figure 8 course?
Tonight, all I'm going to do is just set a pace and try to stay out of trouble the first hour, and then last 2 hours just hopefully mechanically while we finish and hang in there.
Stock cars are supposed to look like stock cars, right? But you have what I would call a super modified that really does not look like a stock car at all. Tell us about your race car.
I found it's easier to buy the aluminum and form the bodies myself than to buy a professional body. It's about half price. So I just went on and formed my own body and made it look like a East Coast modified.
You were laughing. You said it was, what, a 1982 Buick Regal or something like that?
They told
Fast for most anything.
They told me I had to name it something, so I named it an 82 Regal because nobody will know what that's going to look like.
Is this your first figure 8, the 3-hour national?
This is my first 3-hour race. This will be my 4th figure 8 I've ever run in.
Can you bring us up to date on what you thought the first time out after all those years on the oval when you didn't have to turn to the right and you didn't have that crossover to worry about? What went through your mind the first time through that crossover?
I figured some of the guys I race with at Raceway Park, they're doing it, and I figured I run with them at Raceway Park, so if they're doing it, I can do it. So that's why I decided to do it. They're paying good money, so give it a shot.
Right now in the start, you have some real heavy hitters up in front of you.
Yeah, we're 4th fast. It's going to be, like I said, first hour, whoever stays out of trouble, and then from the next 2 hours, be mechanical.
Is it your thought to let somebody else set the pace early and just wait for the first hour or two to pass by?
That's what I'm planning on doing, yeah.
Okay, the big number 0, not a fancy paint job really because it's all aluminum, but a big number 0, Lonnie Breedlove, good luck.
Yeah, thank you.
The green flag flutters one more time, and jumping out in front where he has been most of this race, Kenny St. John in number 1 takes over. Wayne Arnold continues to run in second position as the Corvettes tear away from the rest of the pack and immediately begin to put distance between themselves and, most significantly, the third-place driver of Chuck Hall, the driver from Toledo, Ohio, a 2-time national figure 8 champion at Islip, New York, runs third here at the Indianapolis Speedrome. He has now lost the lap to the 2 leading Corvettes. Wayne Arnold, incidentally, has a broken valve spring on that race car. You won't see nearly the acceleration in the throttle pedal in that number 12 race car as we've seen in the early parts of this racetrack. He'll try and stay on the course as long as he possibly can, and right now, I'll tell you, he's looking pretty strong as he continues to run in second position. We've got debris and a lot of moisture on the racetrack right in front of the flagman, Kyle Hall, which is turn number 1 here on the course. The yellow flag was out momentarily. Now we're green once again.
Wayne Arnold not showing really the effects of that broken valve spring at this point in time. Larry, obviously that was the reason for the smoke that he was showing. Still running strongly on the racetrack, but it could pose some serious problem for car number 12 later on. A lot of racing in front of him, nearly 2.5 hours yet to go. You've got to suspect before this thing is over that number 12, unless something miraculous happens, is not going to be able to hang in there. We have not seen the return of car number 4, Jack Dandy. I don't believe at this point he was hoping for 15 or 20 minutes to get that fuel tank replaced and repaired, and we as yet have not seen him back on the racing surface. Arnold's back around St. John, so those two machines, as they've done all season long, continuing to battle, and Luby Allen nearly collides with number 4, Bill Fraser. Allen now gets together with 54, Bob Stute. Bob will go around Luby now and continue to run. We haven't mentioned 54, Bob Stute. I've got to suspect that he's near the front, and Gary Gross slides sideways through the crossover. He was one of our front runners in the early going of this race. Continues on his way. No serious damage done to his automobile, but it was a close call as your two leaders dash to the crossover between Chuck Hall and Gary Early.
Robin regards the Stute. Unofficially, he is in 5th position in the race at this point. He's been on the racetrack since the green flag. He started in 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14th position in this event. He's been out there all night without incident, and he has worked himself up certainly into the top 5, unofficially into number 5 position, Bob Stute, a man who came down from Dearborn Heights. He was 2nd in this race a year ago. His experience is beginning to show through.
That very same Bob Stute just started into the pit area, Larry. Bob Stute is pulled off the racetrack and into the pit. You see some people scurrying around west into the pit area. I believe that was for Bob Stute's automobile. That's where he was pitted earlier in the evening. I don't know what the problem is, but it has to be something serious or Bob would not pull off the track at this point in the race. Wayne Arnold now building his lead over Kenny St. John. I wonder whether or not St. John is aware of the problems that Wayne is having.
St. John has been having some trouble traversing the X in the middle of the racetrack. At the crossover, Arnold has been getting just the right brakes, or maybe he's making the right brakes, Rob, I don't know, but at any case, at this point, Arnold has been a better traffic driver than St. John over the last 5 minutes.
Well, Ron Sleepy Tripp, a name familiar to all open-wheel racing fans, came out one night to the Speedrome to watch an outlaw stock car figure 8 race. And he intoned on that particular evening that he had never seen anybody with any better reflexes or true innate driving skills than Wayne Arnold. And coming from a fellow like Sleepy Tripp, quite a compliment. And again, St. John forced to slow down in the crossover. He just doesn't seem to be able to be as slick and as smooth and timing his moves through the crossover as does Wayne Arnold. Again, we could surmise and speculate that maybe he realizes that Arnold is having problems with car number 12.
Well, St. John has also built himself a reputation of being one of the most aggressive kind of race drivers that there is, be it an oval race or a figure 8 race, and he just hasn't been taking those kinds of chances that people are accustomed to seeing him take tonight. Reason being, I don't know, maybe he's saving something for the final hour. Again, we're going to go 3 hours, and remember, we have not completed even 1 hour of this race as of yet.
Kenny St. John was the 1980 Pro Stock champion here at the Speedrome, and he had almost as good a year as Wayne Arnold did this season. A lot of people have speculated, Larry, that perhaps it hurt Kenny that he wasn't competing here as much as he did in 1981. It's got to give a guy like a Wayne Arnold an edge when he's here every racing night of the season. And he's showing that here tonight. St. John was a master of this track, and near the end of this racing season, became one once again in this outlaw stock car. But you've still got to give the edge to the guy who spent more laps on this racetrack in 1981. Unofficially, your standings now at lap 104, the time of our last red flag 15 laps ago. Your leader, car number 12, Wayne Arnold. Second, Kenny St. John, car number 1. Both drivers had completed an equal number of laps. 1 lap down was car number 5, Chuck Hall. 4 laps down was car number 54, Bob Stute. We've not seen the return of car number 54 since he went into the pit area about 6 laps ago. Running 5th was car number 0, Lonnie Breedlove, 4 laps back. Ray Bray in PH5 was 6th, 5 laps down. 7th was car number 7, Jim Tunney, 8 laps down, or 6 laps down rather. 8th was car number 32, Gary Gross, who was 8 laps down, as was car number 2, Donnie Utterback, and 10th was number 779, Ray Gaddis, who had completed 94 laps, or 10 laps behind your leader.
Mike Klein has now moved to the Speedway, another Indianapolis driver. In a 1969 metallic blue Camaro, Mike Klein joins the race to once again attempt to bring this field up to 24. Remember the unusual rules here for this event, that as soon as one of the competitors on the racetrack pulls off and is off for any length of time at all, then another car among those non-qualifiers, at least non-qualifiers from the initial 24 fastest, is given the privilege to come onto the racetrack. We have added some 12 additional cars now to this field since the green flag initially fell back about an hour ago at the start of this race. Ray Bray, who has since come back out onto the racetrack, exited with ignition problems, you remember, and one of the competitors has lost the wheel. The car coming to a halt near the center of the racetrack as the wheel, the axle looks like has come out, continues to tilt around in turn number 2. No, it's not an axle, it's just the wheel came off the race car, perhaps just torn off the rim as it traversed the turns here at the Speedrome.
That was car number 98X, Cecil Carr, who had qualified 24th in our starting field. Cecil back into the pit area, but that wheel sitting in a precarious position on the racetrack. In fact, it could pose some problems for drivers later on as they come very, very close to that wheel moving off that turn. So far, everybody sliding safely by, and maybe with the velocity carrying them out past it, it might not be a major problem. They've all gone by it once, realized that it's sitting there. Maybe it won't create any serious problems from here on. Richard Schaefer in car number 21 has sat there since, in fact, right after the red flag that we experienced in lap 104. So for 24 laps, Richard Schaefer's been sitting in the infield.
Well, Ray Bray is back out onto the racetrack. A guy was high as fourth in this race. He had ignition problems, which he could not get, which they rather did solve. And one of the competitors, it's Chuck Hall, drives into the wheel, which has been picked up by another competitor. And Hall went right over the top of that wheel, went way up in the air, was launched right off the center of the racetrack like a Saturn rocket blasting off from the infield. Hall went way up in the air, but he goes back to racing speed. So apparently, it did not damage that race car.
Well, because of that, the red comes out once again on lap number 130, and that was one of the most amazing things I've ever seen on the racetrack. Chuck Hall doing a literal wheelie in car number 5, and can you imagine the force on the front end of that machine and on Chuck himself?
We're under green again, and once again Arnold and St. John take off. Dennis Pace was driving Chuck Hall's car when it went over the tire, so Chuck Hall, the man who started this race in the number 5 race car, was not piloting it when the car had its problems. Dennis Pace, also from the Detroit area, driving Chuck Hall's car. Now we find out when it had the incident.
Luby Allen spinning again in car number A60. Now Chuck Hall's number 5 back onto the racetrack. We've been told that it does have a broken A-frame. Not sure whether or not that has been repaired. I kind of doubt it in that short period of time. Maybe they decided to go ahead and compete with it like that, at least for the time being, and hope for another red flag. Kenny St. John now alongside and around Wayne Arnold, so yet another lead change. In lap number 131, it's Kenny St. John back out in front with Wayne Arnold second. Chuck Hall's number 5, and it looks like that's Chuck Hall back in car number 5. Appears to be running fairly strongly, despite the fact that we've been told he suffered a broken A-frame. Car number 5 looking like it's running strong, and Wayne Arnold continuing to show smoke in car number 12. Well, I'm not sure whether or not that valve spring should be causing him any major problems. Right now, it doesn't appear to be doing so, as Arnold continues to set the pace, with St. John now falling safely back into second position once again.
Bob Cloud in car number 43X has returned to the pits, the yellow and white number 43. We had a couple of them entered here. Donnie Garrigus, one of the local regulars and local favorites, was among our fastest 24 qualifiers. Garrigus continues on the racetrack. Cloud has returned to the pits, at least momentarily. Again, remember, he'll have an opportunity to come back out again if he so chooses.
Now had it confirmed from along the pit area from Gary Lee. Dennis Pace is still driving car number 5. So despite having that thrill of a lifetime, if that's how you'd like to refer to it, Dennis Pace continuing to do the driving in car number 5.
And the 4 cars that have run near the front of this race, either on the racetrack at speed or at least on the scoring ledger all night long, the cars of St. John, Arnold, Hall, and the PH5 of Ray Bray are there once again running together. Certainly the 4 fastest cars in the racetrack, although right now Gary Early, the Michigan driver, seemingly able to keep pace with the 4 of them, but Arnold and St. John, to the best of our knowledge, continue. We've had a collision at the crossover.
Jim Tunney hitting car number 6, Jack Dawsey, very hard. Heavy damage sustained to the front of car number 7. Jim Tunney getting into Jack Dawsey in number 6. Tunney's car obviously is not going to go anyplace. It's been shortened about a foot in the front of that automobile. Jack Dawsey still sitting out in the racing groove. If Jack can move off the racetrack, we may continue to run under the yellow. Carl Hall, I can see now readying the red flag as it doesn't look like Dawsey able to move. And Mike St. John, who was trying to go through the crossover, as he got together with another machine, had to turn an opposite direction. Again, it looks like we've had a fuel tank or something, some liquid container that slid up alongside the concrete wall along the main straightaway. Liquid pouring off the racetrack or down the racetrack from that wall area. Jim Tunney now climbing out of his car. Doesn't appear to be injured seriously, but that's got to be quite a jolt to Jim. He really tagged Jack Dawsey Sr. Now Jack Dawsey Jr., the driver of car number 52, has pulled up and stopped next to his dad, hopefully to lend some assistance there.
Well, a very interesting couple of moments also for young Mike St. John in the white blue trim number 1M. St. John actually changed the course that he was on. He was headed toward the south side of the racetrack, and he found himself in a very dangerous situation at the crossover. Actually made a 180-degree turn and headed toward the north end of the racetrack, and as he headed toward the north end, then he changed his mind, started to head back south again, and along came the black number 4 car of Bill Frazier, a guy who finished 5th here a year ago, and Frazier really got on the binders and just barely missed St. John. While all that was going on, somehow a fuel tank from somebody ended up against the wall on the oval's front stretch.
Well, the evening ends in big disappointment for Jim Tunney, the driver of car number 7. He built the machine from the ground up himself. Jim now walking off the racetrack. I'm sure you can hear you race fans' applause. Jim was running in 4th position at the last red flag at 121 laps, and we anticipate that he probably was in 4th or maybe even better. The machines ahead of him, of course, Arnold, St. John, and number 5, Chuck Hall. But that was at the prior red flag, and since that point in time, Chuck Hall's machine with Dennis Pace doing the driving had fallen yet several more laps down. At 129 laps, your leader was Kenny St. John with Wayne Arnold second. Both machines had completed 129 circuits. Once again, with a drop of the green, Kenny St. John begins to move in car number 1. Wayne Arnold definitely not running as fast as he was early in the race, but you don't want to count him out. If number 12 continues to run, Arnold is certainly capable of putting it out in front. St. John setting the pace. Arnold continues to be second on the lead lap. And from there, well, who knows? I'm not sure at this point, Larry, who's running in 3rd position. Unofficially, we say that it's probably still Chuck Hall. Now we're getting confirmation at that red flag at 137 laps. It was still Chuck Hall. 3rd, 3 laps down to your leaders. 8 laps down in 4th position, car number 0, Lonnie Breedlove. 9 down, car number 7, Jim Tunney. And that will do it for Tunney, of course, with 128 laps complete. That'll be his racing evening. Riding 6th was car number 2, Donnie Utterback. He was 11 laps back. 7th was 779. That, of course, Ray Gaddis, of whom we were just speaking, with 124. He was 13 laps down. 14 down was car number 32 in 8th position, Gary Gross. 9th was car number 09, Gary Early with 122 laps, and Mike St. John 10th in car number 1M with 119, some 18 laps behind your leader.
In almost all other forms of racing, the drivers have quite a number of opportunities on the racetrack to communicate with their crews. In a lot of professional type racing, of course, there are two-way radios now installed in the race cars. Stock car racing and Indianapolis type car racing, just to name a couple. In most forms of oval track racing, the drivers at least have an opportunity at one point on the racetrack to look up and get signals from the crews. But here at the Indianapolis Speedrome on a figure-8 race, there's absolutely no time anywhere around this racetrack for a driver to have any form of communication whatsoever with anybody else. It's a lonely job out there driving a figure-8 course on an oval that is designed to be 1/5 of a mile in length. The figure-8 course itself is about 1/3 of a mile, but you're in a corner or headed toward that crossover every second of the time that you're out there. Just as you successfully traverse that corner and try to maneuver your way around the drivers that are around you, then you're at the apex of that turn, or rather the end of that turn, and the nose of your race car is pointed toward the center of the infield. And if you're lucky, there's not somebody on the other side of the racetrack headed for the same spot that you are. So constant attention demanded here on a figure-8 course. No time to relax and no time to really communicate with other people and find out what's going on.
A couple of fresh drivers have now been added to the racing surface. Ernie Harson in car number 21, Bruce McFall in 93. So they're fresh, but despite the fact that we've had a bunch of cars drop out of this race in relatively early going, we see that a couple of guys have been added to the racetrack, and we've still, Larry, got a full racetrack of automobiles.
Well, a guy who is really beginning to pick up some steam now again, Rob, is Lonnie Breedlove. Breedlove in that radically designed aerodynamic machine. It's radically designed for this type of racing. Lost quite a number of laps in the pit area earlier because they had some problems with the race car. Breedlove had dropped 11 laps down to the two leaders, St. John and Arnold, but he has now moved back up into correction on the Breedlove. Breedlove had lost 8 laps down. He had moved back up to 5th position on the racetrack, and Arnold right now appears to be one of the fastest cars in the speedway. He's really barreling around the turns and lead-footing it through the crossover.
And again, Kenny St. John back out in front as these two drivers continue to jockey for position. It was Arnold for several laps. Now it's St. John back out in front. And they continue to dice with one another. Watch Kenny St. John making the move through the crossover. That time his strategy was the wrong one, and Wayne Arnold regains the front-running position in car number 12.
Rob, I tell you, sometimes there just isn't anything more that you can do about it if the traffic is too heavy. Look at the crossover right now. They were 5 abreast at one point, coming from the south toward the north and going from the north toward the south. Well, the blue coats, they were 2 abreast that time through.
Watch your leaders in the crossover. 2 cars, Gary Early and Jack Dawsey, choosing to turn at right angles to the direction in which they were traveling. And that's an interesting bit of strategy, Larry. If it just looks like you can't avoid a collision in the crossover, you turn the opposite direction and begin to flow with the traffic. And that's exactly what Jack Dawsey Jr. and Gary Early did that time through. Early was able to regain control of his machine and head the right direction. But Jack Dawsey, in essence, lost a half lap as he continued to go with the flow of traffic.
That is an interesting way of blending, and maybe something that could have been used by a couple of competitors in May of this year, if you think about it.
Closing in now on 1 hour of racing in this event. A little over 55 minutes, closing in on 56 in fact. 155 laps completed at this point in the race. Really incredible that 2 machines could be on the lead lap this far into an event of this type. That's the way it is. The 2 guys who dominated outlaw stock car racing at the Speedrome all year long, Wayne Arnold and Kenny St. John, setting the pace. couple of the Speedrome's regular pro stock drivers have continued to just drive smoothly and unobtrusively around the racetrack. They would include car number 2, Donnie Utterback, with the last red flag, was running in 6th position. Remember, that's Wayne Arnold's pro stock automobile. Also, Bill Fraser in car number 4. Now, he had a problem early, but while he's been on the track, Bill Fraser has run very strongly in his Camaro. Also running a very smooth and strong race is car number 32, Gary Gross, and I don't believe Gary's had any major problems at this point in the competition. Another driver doing a good job, Mike St. John in the white car number 1, younger brother of Kenny St. John. Despite the fact that he's got a piece of equipment not capable of running out in front, Mike doing a creditable job in his automobile.
Rob, you're right. In addition to St. John and Arnold, the other 3 people who have had a completely uneventful race so far are Utterback, Gaddis, and Gross. Now, we say uneventful in the case of Gaddis. Gaddis lost a couple of laps when his car failed to restart after one of the red flags. But other than that, Gaddis has had a clean slate all night long, along with Gross, Utterback, and those 2 leaders, Arnold and St. John. Is there any chinks in the armor of Arnold and St. John? It certainly doesn't look like it at this point. Arnold and St. John continue to dominate as Rich Fenwick in car number 40 in a 1970 Nova, the first Nova race car to be in this race tonight, comes onto the field as a replacement competitor for one of those who has dropped out.
Ernie Harson, 21X, has spun in the south end of the racetrack and now sits the opposite direction facing traffic. Ernie trying to get the engine restarted in that car. Obviously, if he can't, the position that he's sitting in, we could see another red flag. Let's hope Ernie gets the machine restarted, and the red does come out once again. Watch the machines as they parade into the pit area one more time on lap number 162.
If that's a parade, Craig Breedlove is a slow driver. I'll tell you, that is one of the fastest parades. It's almost like an explosion heading for that bullpen area, or the pit area, if you will, when the red flag flies. Everybody with a lot of work to do, topping off the fuel tank. Some of the people probably wanting to change rubber on the front end, perhaps the rear end assemblies of these race cars. Some of the top contenders maybe even making some chassis adjustments. But boy, I tell you, you can sure tell they're in a big hurry to get back.
Quick green flag, and we're back to racing with only 9 cars on the track. Watch them file back out onto the racing surface. Gary Lee, we certainly appreciate your help and assistance, your insight down in the pit area. Once that red flag falls, Gary goes to work in a frenzy to get all the information he possibly can for us.
Well, Rob, I'll tell you, a very interesting turn of events as a lot of the competitors caught unprepared when the most recent green flag flew after our 9th red flag. And one of those people who had begun to really make some ground up was Lonnie Breedlove. And Breedlove was stuck in the pits when the green flag came back out. Breedlove now since returned to the racetrack, but he was 8 laps down to the 2 leaders. He had just unlapped himself, so he had moved himself into a position where he was 7 laps down, with still 2 hours of racing to go. But Breedlove lost that lap that he worked so hard to pick up because he just wasn't ready to come out of the starting blocks when the race restarted. We only had about 10 or 11 cars in the racetrack when the race restarted. We still don't have a full contingent of 24 out there. We've been green for about 3 laps.
Sure, we'll wait another minute or so for those that were in the pit area at the time of the red to move back out onto the racetrack, and then additional cars will be added. Coming up on the 1 hour mark, just 10 seconds from right now, we'll reach 1 hour. Let's see how many laps your leaders will have completed at that point in the race. It's Wayne Arnold now back out in front. Kenny St. John second. 1 hour complete. 166 laps down for your leaders. At that pace, they'll complete just about 500 laps over the 3 hours. That means the second half hour a bit slower than the first one. Racetrack obviously a little bit more slippery, and I'm sure they're going to have to slow down just a bit. The red flags will certainly help. A driver, Larry, if he has several opportunities to rest in the pit area, won't have to pace himself physically, hopefully out on the racing surface itself. they can run full bore and hope for another flag and another opportunity to rest.
And there is incentive to drive as hard as you possibly can during every green flag, because the winner's purse here is $4,000 or $10 per completed lap. So, should a competitor be able to finish 500 laps, that winning purse, instead of being just $4,000, balloons up to $5,000. So there certainly is an awful lot of encouragement to go as fast as you can every time that you're out there under a green flag condition.
Kenny St. John and Wayne Arnold doing battle as if they were on lap number 49 of a 50-lap feature. At the present rate that the drivers are traveling, 498 laps would be completed. Bill Fraser gets into car number 36, Mike Klein. Let's see if Fraser able to get going again. He has slowed down. Now he moves through the crossover, but those two machines got together, and it's cost Klein a flat left rear tire. So Mike will continue around the racetrack and back into the pit area to change that left rear rubber on his automobile.
Well, Bill Fraser, that is, in the black number 4. That's Black and Fraser together. A man who did quite well here a year ago in this event, finishing in the top 5, 5th to be exact in the 1980 event. He really came in as one of the guys who might well have been one of the dark horses for this race, but he's had all kinds of problems, and again he's involved in a minor skirmish, and Fraser several laps behind the front-running Arnold and St. John. It continues to be the black number 1 of Kenny St. John and the orange number 12 of Wayne Arnold.
Jack Dawsey Jr., Larry, hard into the wall in the north end of the racetrack, and suffered some damage to the right front. He ran out of racetrack, got together another machine, and went hard into that concrete wall. Jack now waiting for an opportunity to move into the pit area.
Mitch Reno in car number 711 from Flat Rock, Michigan, is on the racetrack, a car that has a number very close to the 771 of the Simmons family. Remember Billy Simmons, car number 771, one of the top 10 qualifiers for the event, one of the top contenders from the Detroit area, started this race but pulled out of the event very early. We expected to see him come back out. We have not seen hide nor hair of him since that time. Billy Simmons certainly not a threat to win, but he could well be back out again. We're only about a third of the way through this race. A lot of action to follow. A lot of things could transpire before the final 120 minutes of this race expire.
Now coming up on the 200 lap mark of this race. Not only is the fatigue telling on race drivers, it's got to be plaguing some of the equipment as well. You not only have to avoid other race cars, but you have to take care of your racing equipment. You have to have it properly prepared for the race, and that's what many of these drivers had said was their key concern coming in tonight, just making sure that they had checked, double-checked, and triple-checked all of their equipment. Flat left front tire now on car number 5, Chuck Hall. He slowed down dramatically. Car number 5 with a flat left front tire, and he'll have to go into the pit area to change that left front racing rubber. Chuck Hall now has gone back into the pit area in car number 5. So we'll see just how long it takes him to rejoin the race.
We understand that Dennis Pace continues to drive the number 5 car entered by Chuck Hall. Dennis Pace continues to drive that, so Pace is the one who has the flat tire and goes back to the pit area. Rob, you know, something I want to comment on, and when you really put all this into perspective with all the red flags we've had, all the confusion, all of the near misses at the crossover, you really got to take your hats off to Kenny St. John and Wayne Arnold. Neither one of them has had anything close to a major incident this entire race, and they have been close to one another. They're concentrating on each other. That's pretty obvious. Neither one letting the other one get out of sight. They've done a magnificent job staying out of trouble, and it really is amazing when you think that everybody else in that starting lineup, with the exception of perhaps Utterback and Gross, have had some type of difficulty. These guys not only been the fastest cars, they've been out there all night with no trouble whatsoever.
And when you think that in 185 laps, Larry, they've made 370 trips through the crossover. Another machine has lost a wheel. It's car number 2, Donnie Utterback, has lost a wheel, and he'll now hustle back into the pit area. But as you were talking about those two drivers, it is truly incredible when you consider how many times they've had to negotiate around other machines in the crossover.
Utterback, we had just commented that he had run a race without incident, was as high as in 5th position, despite the fact that he was many laps down to the 2 leaders. Utterback sands the right front tire, returns to the pits. He's pitting under green. That's going to cost him obviously considerably more laps, but Utterback, we expect for him to look for him to be back out shortly.
Probably the closest either of our leaders has come to anything serious was on about the 3rd lap of the race when Kenny St. John, trying to time a maneuver through the crossover, got briefly together with number 6 Jack Dossie Sr., who since has departed from this race. But after he got calmed down and settled down just a bit, no problems have plagued either one of our front runners. Wayne Arnold has had some mechanical difficulties, first experiencing a cracked distributor cap, then talking about a broken valve spring, but you sure couldn't tell it. Car number 12 continues to run out in front. At 163 laps, the time of our last red flag, it was St. John and Arnold, the leaders on the same lap. Chuck Hall and Dennis Pace, co-equals, driving number 5, were 5 laps back. Lonnie Breedlove was 4th, 8 laps down to your leader. Riding 5th was car number 2, Donnie Utterback. He had 148 complete. That was 15 laps down. 779, Ray Gaddis was riding in 6th. He had completed 148 and was on the same lap with Donnie Utterback. 7th was Gary Grossen, car number 32 with 146 complete. 8th was Mike St. John in car number 1M. 9th was Dave Grayson in car number 8. And 10th, 09, Gary Early. Gary was 25 laps down to your lead cars and still managing to run in the top 10. So a real testimonial to the talents and the performance of the race cars. Car number 1, Kenny St. John, and number 12, Wayne Arnold.
Well, Arnold set a new track record, which was about 1.5 seconds faster than the old record in qualifying for this race at 17.7 rounded off. The old record was 19 seconds, and that's exactly what Arnold and St. John are running at in this race. So Arnold and St. John traversing this 1/3 mile figure 8 course at a time equal to the old track record.
Your 2 leaders, nearly encountering disaster, reached the crossover at the exact same time as Jack Dandy. Jack in car number 4 jumped on the binders and deferred to your 2 front runners, but for a minute looked like it could have been serious trouble for either St. John or Arnold, or perhaps even both. They continue to run full blast around the competition. Your leaders now in very heavy traffic. Continues to be Kenny St. John, at least at this point, setting the pace, with Wayne Arnold second in car number 12. It looks like a parking lot traffic jam near the crossover. Chuck Hall, one of the cars involved, with Marion Hester, Dean Griffin, Donnie Garrigus, and now Hall will continue on his way, but he'll lose yet another lap to your front runners. St. John and Arnold blazing around Jack Dandy, and now Chuck Hall to put him another lap down. Coming up on the 200th lap of this race, Kenny St. John now slowing down to time his move through the crossover. Now he blasts through, and that allows Wayne Arnold to close right in behind him once again. Bill Fraser now spinning as he nears the crossover in car number 4. I don't know whether Bill has come to a stop. I think he's just waiting for traffic to clear. And again, Jack Dandy taking a risky opportunity to go through the crossover. Wayne Arnold now has gotten back around Kenny St. John, and you could not ask for a tighter battle for the lead. They'll this time by complete lap number 200, and they'll do it side by side. Larry, incredible. 200 laps in, and your two front runners go by the start-finish line in a dead heat for that front spot.
Rob, you know, I also have to believe that they've been able to run so closely with one another that both of them have got something left. I don't think they've shown us all the speed they are capable of. And I think that without really communicating directly and plotting strategy together, I think they're both kind of playing into each other's hands. They both knew that they've got a little more horsepower than most of the other competitors. And believe it or not, I'm convinced they're definitely pacing themselves. They probably didn't anticipate that both of them would be able to go so long. Boy, they come so close together that time. They're still racing out there, even though we still suppose that they are pacing one another. But I doubt that both of them felt that the other one would be able to go so long without having some type of major difficulty.
I think one word describes what's going on between those two race drivers, and that is respect. Now, a couple of machines having trouble. Dennis Pace in car number 5, the Chuck Hall machine, back into the pit area. Now Gary Gross pulls off the racetrack, one of our front runners, car number 32, with a flat rear tire. Well, as I was saying, I think the best word to describe what's going on between Kenny St. John and Wayne Arnold is respect. They respect one another as now Dennis Pace moves back out onto the racetrack. And due to that respect, they're not going to do anything foolish, taking any unnecessary risks, but as you said earlier, just simply keeping one another in sight. Another machine has been added now to the group of contenders on the racetrack. Jimmy Cook in car number 54X. He was our 45th qualifier, and he now has been added to the field at the 206th lap. Well, those two leaders, Wayne Arnold and Kenny St. John, continuing to run right together. It doesn't seem to matter whether they're in traffic or whether they're in the clear. Those two cars tied together with a rope, it appears. Occasionally, one of them will build a quarter or a half a lap advantage, and inevitably, he'll encounter some heavy traffic that will allow the other guy to catch up. Just about as evenly matched in skill and mechanical ability as you could possibly want on the racetrack. Car number 12, Wayne Arnold, and car number 1, Kenny St. John. Dennis Pace in car number 5 was only in the pit area for a short period of time. Now he's back out on the racetrack. However, Gary Gross, who went in at the same time, was also in the top 10. Gary has not returned quite so quickly.
And Jack Dandy, who lost the gas tank in the first half hour of this event, spent about 30 minutes in the pit area replacing the gas tank. He came back out. Robbie's back in the pits again. Maybe they did not solve all of their problems in restoring the petrol supply to that race car.
Well, St. John now using heavy traffic in front of Wayne Arnold to begin to stretch his lead. It's now grown to a quarter of a lap, but we've seen this earlier. Bill Fraser back in the pits now in car number 4. We've seen this happen earlier, Larry, where one of these two machines has built a bit of an edge, and then either due to a red flag or traffic in front of the leader, the man in second has been able to close it up. So I think you'll probably see now Arnold driving just a bit harder than he did earlier, and he now almost runs out of racing room as Gary Early and Dean Griffin come very close to putting Wayne Arnold in the racetrack's retaining wall on the north end of the racetrack.
Rob, you know, it's interesting how quickly it does happen. You run for an hour and a half, you stay together on the racetrack, and all of a sudden just a couple of minor situations at the crossover puts about a quarter of a lap difference between the first two leaders. And Rob, something else that I noticed, when they get separated, and Arnold drives right into one of the competitors right in front of him. Luby Allen not going quite as quickly as Arnold wanted to do. Let's see if this damaged Wayne Arnold's car at all. You can see the front end of that race car, the bumper on Wayne Arnold's car has been bent up from the location that was originally arranged on that race car, but Arnold doesn't seem to have lost any momentum because of it. We had just begun to comment, Rob, that it seems like when they get separated, both of them drive considerably more hard than what they do when they're together. The guy up front realizing he has an opportunity to run away and hide, and the guy in the back, of course, and Arnold has gone into the pits.
Apparently the problem's serious. It looks like water or oil on the racetrack from one of the machines. We'd hate to conjecture that it's Wayne Arnold, but it looks like it very well could be. And now car number 0, Lonnie Breedlove, has had a problem. Gary Lee has gone to Wayne Arnold's pit. Gary, can you tell us anything?
Well, this obviously will totally change the complexion of this evening's competition as the car is overheating. That is a concern the crew had expressed earlier. They said if we can stay out there without the car overheating, we should be in good shape. We can race on the 7 cylinders. So right now they're trying to cool off the cooling system, put some more water in there, and now we can, Wayne has the helmet off. How's the body holding up? Oh, the body's okay. Car ain't looking too good right now. It appears that despite the overheating, you do have plenty of power to dice any time with Kenny St. John. Yeah, we're running okay, but I got a center shock broke or something other on it, and it's hopping dead when I go in. If I get in too hard, that's what happened to me down on the corner. Got the hop with me, it wouldn't stop. No, I don't know. Just had to hang in there. Okay, there you are. Going to hang in there. They're going to cool this car off. They're still working in the engine compartment. And as we had mentioned earlier, the reason that Bill Fraser was in to change the left rear tires, and we were checking on the condition of car number 5. That was Ray Bray's car. Apparently that car is finished for the evening with transmission problems. So right now, as the race continues, so does the work on car number 12. Rob?
Well, Rob, we find out that it wasn't the collision exactly that sidelined Wayne Arnold. They've been having a problem with the engine overheating prior to that little altercation. They also were having, Wayne was complaining about a bad ride problem. He had a shock going out, so after the collision, I guess Arnold decided it was time to just pull into the pit area and maybe check over the entire race car. They feel they're in a position certainly to come home in the top 5, but unless something happens to St. John, it looks like we may have a guy who's going to win his 4th national championship figure 8 race in a row, Rob.
Still very early, but at this point in time, there's no doubt that St. John is the favorite to do just that. A lot of other drivers who have something else in mind, and with so much race in front of us, still plenty of opportunity for St. John to have his share of the problem. Things have pretty well gone his way since very early in the race. Larry, it looks like, I can't tell whether he's got a right rear axle that's bent or perhaps just some dents in his right rear chrome wheel. But watch Kenny St. John's right rear of his automobile this time as he comes through the crossover after coming to an almost halt. There's something definitely going on there, perhaps just a bent right rear wheel and nothing seriously wrong with the axle. But he has been banged around just a bit in this one, as has car number 0. As we look at Lonnie Breedlove's car, the front bumper on that machine looks almost identical to the position in which Wayne Arnold's bumper was. So obviously number 0 has been using his front end for something other than simply braking the air.
Well, I'll tell you, Rob, in regards to St. John's race car, I think I'd think twice before I would present 24 chrome wheels to that crossover about 1,000 times in one 3-hour period. A lot of money out there in the Kenny St. John race car. Certainly a car worthy of almost any late model race course in this country, and without a doubt a race car that is race worthy and competitively so, or would be competitively so in such organizations as the American Speed Association. Kenny St. John, the black, orange, silver, and yellow trim #1 race car, the Corvette stock car. We understand we have another report now from Gary Lee down in the pit area. Gary?
Well, right now, Gary Groves is still strapped in car 32. They broke a pipe off the header on the right side of the V8 engine, and right now the welder is down here tending to that, so we should see Gary Groves back on the track momentarily.
Marion Hester is one of the competitors who was added to this field very late in the going. He was not among our first 24 qualifiers. He too is having an overheating problem, something that we can expect a lot of here in the last 2 hours of this endurance contest. Donnie Garrigus suddenly makes a U-turn as we have gone red here at the Speedway. We have gone red once again, and most of the competitors, of course, head back to the pits to top off those fuel tanks again. Mike St. John, the younger driver of the man who has led most of this race, Kenny St. John, may not be back. He has been in the pits for about a half hour, and they were having a problem with the gas tank in the race car, and they were trying to reposition it and were not having much success in doing so. Also, just before this red flag, Wayne Arnold has presented himself once again trackside, and Arnold will be doing battle most assuredly with Kenny St. John, although now Arnold will labor at about a 10-lap deficit to the leader, Kenny St. John.
Field underway once again, and very shortly we'll be returning to racing action. Watch Jack Jenkins now. He throws the green flag. Even the flagman needs relief occasionally. Carl Hall now turns the duties over to Jack Jenkins. Your leader continues to be Kenny St. John in car #1. We're not sure who is in second position at this point in time, but I think, Larry, you're probably right. With the departure of Wayne Arnold, I would think that probably Lonnie Breedlove is now in second position in car #0. Breedlove is in second position now, but he and car #12, Wayne Arnold, are on the same lap. Wayne has some distance to make up on the racetrack. Lonnie had lost a couple of laps early in the race, but since coming back out on the racetrack has had an uneventful race to this point. Real traffic jam on the crossover. Last year, if you remember, Kenny St. John came from a 12-lap deficit to win this event. So it's entirely possible that you do not want to count Lonnie Breedlove nor Wayne Arnold out of this event. St. John has completed 231 laps. Breedlove and Arnold both with 219 to their credit.
Well, Rob, another driver we commented about briefly about 5 minutes ago. He scrapes the wall as we begin to comment about him again in turns 3 and 4. Dennis Pace in Chuck Hall's #5 race car, the Lexus Auto Parts, the Lexus Road Auto Parts Special from the Detroit-Toledo area. I'm a little surprised that Dennis Pace has stayed in the car as long as he has. Chuck Hall, one of the top competitors of all time in figure 8 racing, who started this car. He qualified as the fastest out-of-towner in 7th position at the start of this race. And apparently at the first red flag, Hall stepped out and Pace stepped in and he's been in it ever since, including surviving a spectacular midair flight through the crossover after about an hour of time had elapsed in this 3-hour endurance contest. The 1981 Indianapolis Speedrome 3-hour figure 8 enduro is what's taking place before you right now. A 3-time winner of this event. Kenny St. John is the leader right now. His 2 closest competitors who have been with him on the racetrack all night long, Lonnie Breedlove and Wayne Arnold, have both encountered mechanical problems during the last 30 minutes of the event, and both of them have dropped to 12 laps down. Now, under normal circumstances, 12 laps, of course, is a major deficit in an automobile race. But in this 3-hour endurance contest, we still have about an hour and a half to go. Remember, the course is only about a third of a lap long, or a third of a mile long, rather. And so 12 laps is certainly within reason. So this one is a long ways from being over, although right now, St. John really has everything to his liking.
Larry, what would your strategy be at this point if you were Wayne Arnold or perhaps even Lonnie Breedlove? You know that Arnold has the equipment to run right side by side with St. John. Do you charge and try to make up some of that time on the racetrack, or do you simply bide your time, drive the same smooth, consistent race that he has done so far, and hope that St. John has problems of his own?
No way would I try to charge right now, because with 12 laps down, Arnold's got to know that he's at least 8 or 10 laps down at this point. And I think if I were Arnold, I wouldn't even be charging as hard as I was when I was running on the track with St. John. He knows he is certainly well ahead of all the other competitors. I would position myself with somebody who is running perhaps in the middle of the pack and simply try to go the rest of the distance without losing any laps. I don't think there's any way that Arnold can risk charging at this particular point in the race.
Machines continually at this point in the race moving in and out of the pit area. Gary Haskett darting in there this time around. It looks like, Larry, we've still got about 20 to 24 machines on the racetrack. Another one now being added from the pit gate. So apparently another machine felt that he will not be able to continue. Look at the action in the crossover. Kenny St. John going between car number 54, which is now Dave Miller driving for Bob Stute, and car number 36, Mike Klein. So St. John, although he is substantially all by himself on the racetrack, continuing to drive very, very hard in car number 1. You know, there might be some logic to that. That is, if you get too slow and try to really pace yourself, you reach that point where you could almost become complacent, become lazy in your driving, lose your concentration, and end up being in trouble, where if you continue at a fairly rapid pace, you tend to remain more alert.
Yeah, Rob, I think you're absolutely right. And, you know, rhythm is something that's also important to a race driver. Even though this is an endurance contest, those guys pretty much had the rhythm down. They planned on racing at the beginning of the race, and as you point out, St. John continues to use it. Now we have a spin right in front of the leader, St. John. The number 54 car with Dave Miller, the relief driver, behind the wheel, spun out right underneath our flagman, Jack Jenkins, and right close by to our leaders, and Jenkins is shredding the right rear tire, that is, on the 54 car, and Jenkins goes back to the pit area. Interesting to find out now whether or not Bob Stute, the man who started that car, or started the race in that car, will return back to the speedway after they change the tire.
Car number 12, Wayne Arnold, has moved back into second position. He's gotten easily around Lonnie Breedlove, and now he's unlapped himself. One of the 12 laps, he was in arrears to your leader, Kenny St. John. So, you know, the good move by St. John now might be to simply try to keep Wayne Arnold in his sights and in his grasp. He should know that Arnold is going to be patient and wait for him to make a mistake. And if he'll just hang on and kind of let Arnold pave the way and clear the racetrack, that probably would be an advisable move. At least it will give him another vehicle by which to pace himself. At 231 laps for your leader, Kenny St. John, the rundown put Lonnie Breedlove in second with 219, Arnold in third with the same number. At 214 laps, Chuck Hall and Dennis Pace in car number 5. In fifth was Ray Gaddis in 779, some 32 laps behind your leader. Marion Hester was sixth in car number 63 with 205. Moving in on the halfway point of this one, over 1 hour and 29 minutes complete. Kenny St. John has run more than 250 laps. That means he is on a pace that would allow him to complete in excess of 500 laps in this one. And it looks like St. John may have done just exactly what we talked about, and that's tacked himself onto the tail of car number 12, Wayne Arnold. It almost cost him, though. The last time through the crossover, he wedged himself between Lonnie Breedlove and Gary Early's car number 09, and now Early gets hit. It's not Early. Driving that machine is Ray Holman, who's taken over in relief, and a couple of relief drivers get together. It's Dave Miller hitting Ray Holman. They were relievers for Bob Stute and Gary Early. Now both of them able to go on, both drivers on their brakes, and that's why they got together. It appears now Ray Holman back into the pit area in car number 09.
One fellow who continues to do just a fine job out there in the pink number 779 is Ray Gaddis. Gaddis was one of the last people to qualify among the original 24. He was the 23rd fastest qualifier. And he certainly is not one of the fastest cars in the racetrack. He's been passed by an awful lot of competitors the whole time that he's been out there. But he's been running very smooth, and right now his smoothness has allowed him to remain in 5th position. He's more than 20 laps down to the leader, but Gaddis has run a race that at only one point brought any type of difficulty to him when the car failed to fire up after one of the red flags. But Ray Gaddis in the pink number 779 continuing to motor around this racetrack and do a fine job when it comes to the categories of smoothness and consistency. No problems at the crossover, no problems at the exit, the middle of the racetrack. We haven't seen him bounce off into the outside retaining walls, and Gaddis continues to run smoothly. Gene Reed in car number 57 in the Ferrara & Sons 1976 Granada has joined the racetrack. Reed in a bright red machine was the 46th fastest qualifier for this race, and now we're down to the point where 46 of the people who attempted to qualify for this event have now joined the race. 259 laps down, which means certainly that Reed doesn't have much of an opportunity for victory, but nonetheless he has an opportunity to run the last half of this race.
At the halfway mark, Larry, your leader, Kenny St. John, had completed 253 laps. That means he is at a pace that would enable him to complete 506, or nearly 30 more than he completed 1 year ago in victory. So car number 1, Kenny St. John, despite the fact that we talked earlier about he and Wayne Arnold when they were running together, simply jockeying for position and pacing themselves, it's still a very rapid pace for your leader as he is really flying in his Corvette car number 1. Arnold has now moved away from him, but remember, Wayne Arnold has now 11 laps to make up.
Ray Holman, relief driving for Gary Early, continues in the pit. The crew is working on the car, not only changing a right front wheel, but also changing a bent tie rod. So a lot of yeoman work going on in the pit area of the Gary Early Ray Holman car number 09. That's one of those teams that made the long 4 or 5 hour drive down from the Detroit, Michigan area to compete here in this 3-hour endurance race.
Something you mentioned earlier bears repeating, and that is there is incentive and motivation for a driver not to be a stroker, to go out and complete as many laps as he can. Guaranteed purse of $4,000 to the winner. If, however, he completes more than 400 laps, the purse is $10 per lap completed. So at the 506 lap pace, Kenny St. John could collect $5,060, assuming he continues to lead and maintain the same rhythm and pace that he has in the first half of this event. 265 laps now complete for your leader. We move into the second half of the race.
Figure 8 racing is a form of automobile racing that actually began as a novelty or as a sidelight. The first figure 8 racing in America took place at the Islip Speedway in Islip, New York in For a couple of years, it was the only speedway in America that conducted figure-8 racing. When this aspect of the sport of automobile racing began, many said that it simply couldn't be done. It couldn't be executed. The drivers wouldn't run hard enough to make the racing exciting. But over a period of years now, it's been about 15 years since figure-8 racing actually got going in full sport and full steam. And now we've got some confusion at the crossover as at least 5 competitors going in different directions come almost to a stop, but no major collisions, and everybody gets back underway, including Luby Allen in the number 60, a yellow 60 from the Indianapolis area, and Lethal Bulls in another yellow 60 from the Indianapolis area. Luby Allen actually from Detroit, rather. Lethal Bulls from Indianapolis. But figure-8 racing now has become a sport all of its own, and a lot of these fellows who compete in figure-8 racing do it almost full-time.
Your 2 front-running automobiles, 2 of the 3 front runners in some heavy traffic now. Lonnie Breedlove as he strives to make up some time on St. John. Remember, Breedlove is 3rd now, a half lap behind Wayne Arnold. Kenny St. John right together with Breedlove. Arnold, it would appear, in the next few minutes may close in enough to make up another lap. And I'm a little surprised that Wayne is running as hard as he is. But right now, without question, car number 12, the fastest car on the racetrack. And Gary Gross has returned now in car number 32. After a long absence, Gary, who had been running 7th at the time of his departure, back on the racetrack, but he's about half an hour behind and probably now 100 laps or so behind your leader. Car number A60, Luby Allen, showing a lot of smoke. I'm not sure whether that's engine smoke or tire smoke. Also number 57, appearing to have a similar problem. Looks like Luby Allen's problem is a tire coming apart in car number 60A. Again, I'm not sure, but that appears to be the problem. He continues to show a great deal of smoke. Look at the action in the crossover. Wayne Arnold almost coming together with another automobile. Car number 0, Lonnie Breedlove, is spun in the south end of the racetrack. Looks like Lonnie having difficulty getting his machine restarted. The yellow comes out. Lethal Bulls and Dave Sensney in front of traffic in the crossover. Now car number 57 has had problems. We noticed a lot of smoke billowing from that machine earlier. Now he's come to a stop. Now Breedlove under his own power once again in car number 0, but he lost a couple of laps more in the process.
Rob, with the most recent additions to the field, we have exactly doubled the number of competitors actually eligible to be on this racetrack right now. 24 cars have been added. The most recent, the number 57 of Dwayne Mertens on the speedway. A pretty well prepared blue and white, looks like a Monte Carlo. I guess that's just an old Camaro that's had a lot of body renovations done to it. Some more chrome wheels make their way to the racetrack, but 48 competitors are actually now eligible to be on the racetrack. Remember, once you are given the go-ahead by the officials to enter this race, that means you are an official entrant until the race is over. So everybody who has been in this race up to this point is eligible to come back onto the racetrack. So theoretically, we could have as many as 48 cars on this speedway before this race is over. And one of the people who has been running most of the night and running pretty well, Gary Gross, in the car number 09, they had some problems. Car number 32, rather, they had some problems earlier. Spent quite a number of laps in the pit area. Has come to a stop on the backstretch here of the Indianapolis Speedrome, and Gross is climbing out of the race car. He comes to a stop with the green number 11 of Herb Rose, and the infield of the Speedrome is now beginning to resemble a parking lot, as we've got 5 competitors who have come to a stop at various locations around the racetrack. The green flag continues as none of them are in any of the racing lanes.
Larry, about 3 machines that are pro stock regulars here at the Speedrome have continued to win their way around the racetrack without having any serious problems. Car number 2, Donnie Utterback, who now is right in front of Wayne Arnold, driving a car painted almost identical to number 12. That's because that's the car that Wayne drove all season long in winning the Pro Stock Championship. Lonnie Breedlove now briefly getting airborne in car number 0 as he came together with another machine. Also running strongly, Bill Fraser in car number 4, and now Gary Haskett gets into car number 5. And also to Bruce McFall, and 7-Eleven also involved. Looks like a radiator gone in that machine, but a chain of events taking place right in the crossover. Everybody appears to be out of trouble and out of danger. Bruce McFall trying to get number 93 underway once again. Gary Haskett dragging a bumper. Now there's a bumper sliding loose on the racetrack, and that caused trouble once before, as did a wheel. Watch out. Car number 12X has come to a stop in the crossover, and he gets nailed by 09. That's Dave Ray Holman. Gary Haskett's old front end dragging on car number 91, and he'll move back into the pit area. Looks like we may see another red flag, and there it is. Car number 12X. Dave Goodwin, who's the one who has come to a stop, or Roger Goodwin, rather, in car number 12X, right in the middle of the racing groove.
Well, Rob, things had certainly become a little ragged around the edges. We now sit with the tire laying quietly and silently right in one of the paths, of the racing paths in the infield area. We had a bumper that was tumbleweeding across the infield area when this racetrack is an oval, and of course across the crossover here when it's a figure-8 racetrack. We had at least one car that had come to a stop, was sitting right in the middle of the X, the center, the nucleus, if you will, of the figure-8 course, and we had at least 5 other cars that were strewn around the infield area of the Indianapolis Speedrome.
great deal of traffic now for your leader, Kenny St. John, approaching lap number 300. Wayne Arnold now right behind him. At the time Wayne had the extended pit stop, he was 12 laps behind St. John. If he passed him again, he would close to within 9 laps. Arnold definitely making up time, but he'll need more than just a fast race car. He'll need a little bit of Lady Luck's assistance if, in fact, he's going to catch St. John before this one is over. 300 laps now. 300 laps completed by your leader, Kenny St. John. 290 by Wayne Arnold, and he screeches to a near halt or a collision as an alternative in the crossover. Jack Dandy getting together down in turn number 1 with another machine. It looks like number 711. Now they're underway once again. Wayne Arnold going around St. John yet another time. Now Arnold just 9 laps behind your leader. Wayne Arnold putting on a one-man show right now in car number 12, driving with almost reckless abandon. But if anybody can do it and get away with it, he's the man that can. And another traffic jam. Watch your 2 front runners separating to go on opposite sides of a conglomeration of automobiles in the crossover. And it looked like Kenny St. John was content to just pace himself in car number 1 until he watched the orange number 12 fly by. And there's just something about that kind of a racing challenge that neither one of these two guys can tolerate without responding. Once Arnold got by, even though he was still 9 laps down, Kenny St. John immediately punched the throttle and began to close on number 12. Jack Dandy spinning again in car number 4, and it looks like he is stuck. The rear end of that automobile has come to rest up on the tire down in turn number 4. Sitting there simply spinning his wheels and unable to move off of that tire down in the 4th turn, or what's the first turn in the figure 8 course. Wayne Arnold, again, a daring move through the crossover. Stays out of trouble, though, and continues on around the racetrack. Kenny St. John in obvious hot pursuit in car number 1, despite the fact that his margin currently a comfortable one at nearly 9 laps. The red flag comes out once again. Obviously, Jack Dandy unable to get car number 4 off of the tire. It spun and backed up onto that tire that marks the infield area of the racetrack. down in the south end of the race course, and now he'll get a little assist from car number 9X. Will push Jack off the racetrack. Unofficially, at 290 laps, the last red flag, Kenny St. John, your leader, Wayne Arnold was 11 laps down at that time. Now, we've watched him make up, we feel, a couple of laps in the interim, and we think Wayne is now 9 laps down to your leader. In third position, 16 laps down, car number 0, Lonnie Breedlove. Again, that's unofficial. Riding fourth in car number 5, Chuck Hall and Dennis Pace, who've alternated driving duties in that machine, 19 laps back. In sixth position, car number 54, the Bob Stute Dave Miller car, and they have completed 251 laps. At the time, your leader had 290. In seventh, driving without relief, car number 8, Dave Grayson, with 242. Eighth was number 4, Bill Fraser, with 237. And ninth, despite spending a lot of time in the pit area, Gary Gross had accumulated 226 laps for ninth, with Luby Allen in car number 60A 10th with 220. 70 laps, Larry, separating at that point in time the leader from the 10th place racer. Green once again, and Wayne Arnold now unofficially 9 laps down and will probably be going after St. John to try to gain another one.
Helping us with the coverage down in the pit area tonight, of course, is Gary Lee, trying to keep abreast of all the things that are happening not only on the racetrack, but where most of the action appears to be happening midway through the race here in the pit area. Gary, you got another report for us.
I think at this point, as we near 2 hours of the 3-hour event, we will get into what I would call the fatigue factor. It is very difficult to be so intense for 3 hours, and I think the fatigue factor, guys, can really impair the judgment of these drivers, the timing as they come off the corner and head for the intersection. So I think we'll see more and more close calls as the race progresses with the drivers that have been out here for all of the 2 hours, as we have seen a number of very close calls and a number of minor altercations in the crossover, because perhaps at this point the judgment is not as sharp, as crisp as it was 2 hours back.
Well, Gary, certainly very true words about the fatigue factor. The level of concentration is something that probably suffers more than anything else. It's so very difficult to continue to concentrate so hard on everything that's going on around you. You also have to start worrying about the race car, or given normal circumstances, at this point in a long race, you're checking the gauges on the dashboard. You're trying to get a feel for the condition of the tires, but now you begin to get tired. You've been out here running for 2 hours, trying to keep abreast not only of the competitors in front and on both sides of you, but as you go through that crossover, trying to utilize as much of your peripheral vision as you possibly can. And a lot of factors really begin to take over, and that level of concentration certainly has to suffer.
Collision in the crossover, more fuel on the racetrack. Car number 9X and car number 4, Bill Fraser, getting together. Fraser, the lucky one, he's able to continue on his own. Tom Barcel, who's come to a rest in front of the main grandstand. took quite a shot in the rear, and you can see now the bright red fuel tank just hanging from the rear of the car after being totally ripped apart and dumping its contents out of the racing groove.
Well, you know, Rob, during the last red flag, we found out that St. John wasn't aware that he had that big lead on Arnold, and there were those who theorized that that was the reason why St. John was racing with Arnold, because he thought he might have been going after him for position. But I tell you, St. John is still running hard out there, and it doesn't seem to make too much difference to Kenny St. John if he's a half a lap, a half a car length, or 10 laps to the front. He's still going as hard as he was at the drop of the green flag 2 hours ago, and on the clock 2.5 hours ago.
He certainly is, and just a couple of minutes ago, Wayne Arnold unlapped himself yet another time. And I felt that at that juncture, St. John might just let him go. He did not slow down and wait, however. He came right back around Wayne Arnold. So St. John still continuing to run at something very close to full throttle in car number 1 as he continues to set the pace in this one. Some 1 hour and 55 minutes into the race. Two cars together now in the crossover. Looks like car number 36. I'm not sure who the other machine is.
And they're pretty well melded together also, Rob. It doesn't look like they're going to be able to extricate themselves in that one. Both the drivers backing back and forth trying to get free. Now it looks like there is a good possibility. Some mechanical maneuvering going on, and they finally break free. The number 711 car of Mitch Reno pulls away, one of the two involved in that one. Rob, we've also reached the point now, just after the 2-hour point in this 3-hour race, where the slowest qualifier, almost all the field coming to a stop at the crossover, at least 8 or 9 cars that time coming to a halt as the traffic was just much too thick for anybody to make any moves. Rob, we had just started to comment that the slowest qualifier eligible to compete, the number 45 car of Phil Lynch, officially the 54th qualifier, has been out on the race. Make it the 57th qualifier, is now out on the racetrack. So theoretically, all 57 cars at any given point in time could now be on this speedway.
Well, in theory, that's definitely true, Larry. However, you have to feel that from this point on, we may begin to see attrition taking its toll and a dwindling of the number of the cars on the racetrack. One of the machines, Luby Allen, now rejoins competition. Sure, periodically we will see machines back on the racetrack after perhaps an hour or maybe even longer of sitting in the pit area. Wayne Arnold is definitely slowing in car number 12. Now he goes back into the pit area. So problems continue to plague the driver of car number 12. Wayne Arnold back into the pits in car number 12. He was slowing the last couple of laps, and Kenny St. John gets hit from behind as he headed toward the crossover. Fishtails dramatically for a few seconds, almost spun all the way around, but it looks like he's okay and no problems for Kenny St. John. Now been told the left rear tire on Wayne Arnold's car number 12 being changed, so all of that work that he had done to try to make up some time on Kenny St. John is going for naught as he'll spend yet a few more circuits in the pit area.
This race began with 24 competitors, the fastest 24 qualifiers of 57 entrants. We have now had a grand total of 57 different cars in this race right now on the racetrack. Unofficially, we have 24 cars as Lethal Bulls, one of the local drivers here, makes contact with the young driver from Minnesota and spins out. We have another collision at the crossover. The number 2 race car of Donnie Otterbach, who has been right in there since the beginning and running quite strong, one of our top 10 drivers, is clipped from behind. That's the Pro Stock car of Wayne Arnold, and Otterbach trying to make his way back into the racing groove. 24 cars right now unofficially on the racetrack at speed. We have 3 of them sitting on the racetrack as we continue to go green. They are in positions on the speedway that does not imperil them. And so the green flag continues to be out. There are at least 3 or 4 other cars in the pit area that we know work is being done on.
Well, Larry, we've just been handed the unofficial standings after 321 laps. too bad that Wayne Arnold forced to make another pit stop, because after trailing by as much as 12 laps, he had moved himself back into contention and was only 6 laps down at that point in time. Another 11 laps back is Lonnie Breedlove in car number 0. He's third, 295 complete at the time St. John had 312. Fourth position, a lap behind Breedlove, was car number 5, the Chuck Hall Dennis Page automobile. And riding in fifth position was 779 Ray Gaddis with 277 laps. Sixth was car number 54, the Bob Stute Dave Miller car with 274. So the margin continues to widen between and among your leaders, with Kenny St. John continuing to set the pace.
Well, Rob, we got a red flag, and for a pretty darn good reason. One of the best reasons I've seen so far tonight, right at the very center of the entire universe. At least the universe for that driver. We've had a car come to a stop. It's one of the cars that was added to this field late in the race, and Rob, I can't make out its car number, but I tell you, I'm pretty glad I'm sure that he was glad to see that red flag.
That's car number 67, I believe. That's the machine of Ray Spears in car number 67. Larry, before the race got underway tonight, all of the racing fans had an opportunity to pick up an entry blank for the Regency Enduro Laps Contest. And now it's time to kind of take a look at just where we might end up at the conclusion of 3 hours. With 19 seconds remaining in the first 2/3 of the race and 339 laps complete at this pace, should Kenny St. John continue to run up front, and at this pace he would complete 510 laps. So if you made the guess of 510 laps or thereabouts, you might be in pretty good shape right now. Back to green flag racing, and St. John continues to run out in front. We've now reached that 2-hour point with your leader, Kenny St. John, completing lap number 340.
Rob, you know, something else that I begin to perceive as I watch particularly the front runners make their way through the crossover successfully, the setup for getting through the intersection actually takes place about 2 full turns before you get there. After each time you pass through the intersection, you face 2 more turns, and I'm certain that you can actually see, particularly in the case of St. John and Arnold, when they're not in heavy traffic, they're looking over their left or right shoulder toward that intersection, even by the time they're about 1/5 of a mile from it. And I think they're setting up and gauging their speed that far away, actually 2 full turns before they make their pass through the crossover.
Well, I think that's an accurate observation. That is what they do. A lot of times you'll see, and a couple of cars together, Bill Fraser, car number 4, tangling with Cecil Carr in 98X, and your leader right there with him, and car number 779, Ray Gaddis. So that involved the 4th place car, or 5th place car rather, Ray Gaddis. Now Bill Fraser apparently loose. It looks like he's got some problems in his car. 779 and 98X, Ray Gaddis and Cecil Carr still trying to free themselves from one another. Gaddis in 779 gets loose and under his own power, but Cecil Carr is still sitting unmoved in the Racing Groove in car number 98X. Out comes the red flag yet another time. Very conveniently, we can give you the rundown at the end of 338 laps and fill you in on the top 5. The leader at that point in time was Kenny St. John with 338 complete. Wayne Arnold was still second in car number 12 at 328. That, remember, despite the fact that he had closed to within 6 laps prior to having to make a green flag pit stop to replace a tire. Arnold 10 laps back at that point. Another 11 back, or another 9 back rather, Lonnie Breedlove in car number 0. Lonnie had completed 319 laps behind your leader Kenny St. John. 4th position belonged to car number 5, the machine of Chuck Hall and Dennis Pace. He had completed 317 laps. And in 5th position was car number 779, Ray Gaddis, with 302. Marion Hester now has turned over the driving duties of car number 63 to another regular pro stock driver here at the Speedrome, Paul Hoaxang. Hoaxang has taken over number 63 for Marion Hester now. Wayne Arnold has just made his way around your leader Kenny St. John once again to now be 9 laps down as opposed to 10, and every time Wayne able to make up a few in traffic, he loses them again in the pit area. Once again, St. John not letting him get away, tagging himself right onto the tail of car number 12, and he'll chase him around the racetrack. Jack Dandy spinning in car number 4A. Remember a bit earlier, he backed on that tire in that exact same location of the racetrack, and we had to bring out the red in order to get him off of it. This time he missed the tire, but he did spin. Fortunately, nobody in his way, and he stayed out of trouble. Bill Tunney Jr. spinning in car number 57.
Approximately 2 hours and 10 minutes into this 3-hour endurance contest. This is the National Championship Figure 8 race, a 3-hour endurance event at the Indianapolis Speedrome in Indianapolis, Indiana. What you're seeing now are the survivors of a field that is actually numbered as many as 57 at one time or another here in the race tonight. 24 started, and as individual competitors dropped off, others who were among the slowest qualifiers behind the first 24 have been added to the field. With a little more than 2 hours having elapsed, we're down to about 18 or 19 competitors still on the racetrack, and another 20 in the pit area actually eligible to come back out if their crews would be successful in making the repairs. One of the competitors, a number 57 race car, the car that hauled the 700 miles from Minnesota thinking this racetrack was dirt, Dwayne Mertens, is having an overheating problem. He has just returned to the pits. And meanwhile, out on the racetrack, Kenny St. John, a man who has won more money here than any other driver in the history of the Indianapolis Speedrome. Looks like he's headed for another $4,000 plus payday here at the Speedrome tonight. The winner's share of tonight's $13,000 purse will be $4,000 or $10 for each completed lap. And St. John is on a pace right now that would take him to more than 500 completed laps in the 3 hours of racing. St. John has completely turned back all of the competitors. He has beaten everybody down on the racetrack, and right now the only enemy that Kenny St. John has are the elements, the race car, the racetrack, and perhaps a little bit of his own fatigue. Kenny St. John, the big black, orange and gold #1 Corvette stock car, the fastest qualifier in this race. He has led the biggest majority of the laps on the speedway, and right now he has about a 10-lap cushion, but still, believe it or not, a long ways to go. About 50 minutes remain in the race. This race is not being scored on the basis of laps completed, but on the basis of a lap time. And 2 hours and 11 minutes, or a little more than 360 laps, are now complete. St. John continues to lead with a 10-lap lead over Wayne Arnold, who runs second. Now here's a rundown from about 10 minutes ago when we had completed 346 laps. Lonnie Breedlove continues to motor in third position. Breedlove was up among the leaders in terms of laps completed for about the first half hour of this race, but he's incurred several minor problems along the way. The crew has changed several tires. They had a transmission leakage problem that they solved, and Breedlove is back on the racetrack in his radically designed ground effects or airfoiled race car. In fourth position is the Chuck Hall Dennis Pace team. The original driver, Chuck Hall, back behind the wheel of the number 5 car. Hall was the fastest qualifier among the non-local drivers who qualified for this race. They are 24 laps down to the leader, St. John. Ray Gaddis, one of the slowest qualifiers among that original 24. He started 23rd in the race, has simply been out there all night long, just hanging in there. He has completed 307 laps, and he runs in the 5th position. In 6th spot is the Bob Stute Dave Miller team, car number 54. 7th is Dave Grayson in car number 8. In 8th position, Bill Fraser, a man who finished in the top 5 here a year ago. 9th is Gary Early in car number 09, and 10th, Downey Utterback in car number 2. But Utterback, who lost his brakes about 15 laps ago, has parked the car for the night. So Utterback, though he shows up as 10th position in the standings, is actually out of the event.
We understand Dennis Pace still driving car number 5 for Chuck Hall. And if that is correct, Dennis has spent far more time in the race car than has Chuck. Now Gary Early, or rather Jack Dandy in car number 4, trailing the whole aft half of his race car. Might be interesting to get an observation, Larry, the next time we go red from Gary Lee, if he can get a chance to talk with some of these drivers. Last year's race, I got a chance to work the pit area, and the final red flag was about 15 minutes from the end, and Kenny St. John chatted with me in a conversational tone as if he'd been sitting in an easy chair drinking a beer and watching a football game all afternoon. Was totally relaxed and didn't seem to have any fatigue whatsoever. The man has to be in good physical condition to be able to endure that, and I think it's a matter of relaxing as much as anything else.
Wayne Arnold has just lost a left rear tire, at least lost the air in it. Arnold has a flat tire. He returns to the pit, so Arnold, who has really had his back up against the wall all night, driving very hard, trying to cut into that lead that St. John has built up, has got another problem. We understand that Gary Lee is ready to go with another comment, perhaps a guest in the pits. Gary?
Rob, to address myself to the comment that you just made about the demeanor of Kenny St. John last year, I think we all could state that if we were only 15 minutes away from picking up $4,000, no matter how tired we were, we could feel great.
Well, Gary, I'm sure you're very right about that. And something else that makes it pretty easy is when the car works well all night. St. John has not been fighting the wheel. The chassis seems to be set up quite well to do both the right and the left turns that are required in a race like this. And when you have the extra horsepower that St. John obviously has, and the car is performing to perfection, perhaps it is indeed like sitting in a rocking chair or an easy chair back home. And as Gary Lee points out to us, when you have that added incentive of several $1,000s coming your way in a very short period of time, has a tendency to take your mind off some of your problems.
And as Wayne Arnold was in the pit area, car number 0, Lonnie Breedlove now makes that battle for second, the closest one on the racetrack. He made up some 4 laps, and although he was 9 laps down prior to the pit stop, he's close to within 5 laps of the second place Wayne Arnold. Meanwhile, Wayne, who was 10 down to Kenny St. John, now falls 15 laps behind your leader.
Well, the man who won the very first of these 3-hour endurance contests is a guy who was not active in the 1981 season and unable to line up a ride for tonight's race. And if anybody certainly is in a position to have some expert commentary about what's going on in the cockpit right now, it would be Jim Fox, the guy who once said that all there was to driving a figure-8 race was stab it and steer it. Gary Lee is with Jim Fox right now.
To the event this evening that Jim would be driving relief for Wayne Arnold should Wayne need it. There was some concern as to whether Wayne could go 3 hours because of his injuries sustained a couple of weeks back in a dirt car race over at Lincoln Park Speedway. Jim, so far, all you've been doing is pacing because Wayne says everything is okay in the cockpit.
Every once in a while I can give him a Coke or something like that, been kind of helping fill it up with fuel and so forth. But so far he's been able to, maintain and hold the distance. They haven't beat him or worked him as hard as he thought maybe he was going to be.
Now, you won everything back in 1977. Can you tell us at this point, after 2 hours in the cockpit, what type of fatigue you were feeling?
You're starting to have brain fatigue. You make little goof-ups, little mistakes that you really shouldn't do. And you start driving a little harder, a little deeper in the corner, and bumping people and things like that. Just your reaction time starts to slow down. You get tired. You concentrate on, gosh, I hope this thing's over fast.
And we suggested earlier that because of this fatigue, there may be some impaired reflexes and the judging of the crossover speed needed to make it through the intersection, whereby later in the race we may see more altercations out there in the crossover.
That's true. You get tired, your brain laps, you forget to look on the out points to see just who's there. Traffic changes quickly. People are having other mechanical problems, running out of gas, breaking down. Things change very, very rapidly, and your mind starts to slow down as things start to happen faster.
And as a former champion, what's it like to be a spectator right now?
It's not fun at all.
All right, well, perhaps you'll have your chance late in the going to hop in behind the steering wheel with car number 12. Thank you, Jim Fox.
Back into the pit area goes Wayne Arnold. He had dropped to 14 laps down to your leader and was only 4 laps ahead of car number 0, Lonnie Breedlove. Now he's back into the pit area, and let's see how much more time Breedlove is able to make up. The highest driver in the standings that was a non-starter, Luby Allen, in car number A60, who is now in 11th position. Back to the pit area now with Gary Lee.
Well, we're starting here with the crew right now. Car number 12, they're working on the front. Perhaps some suspension damage. Let's call in Jim Fox to get any indication of what's wrong.
No, I don't.
Well, they have a large crowbar now as they put under the front suspension on the left side. So apparently something was bent. We were here in the pit area, guys. We could not see if there had been some altercation involving Wayne Arnold. Let's check in the cockpit if we can get close enough into the crew to find out exactly what is wrong with car number 12. Wayne, if you can hear us, what's the problem? Well, obviously you cannot hear Wayne very well because he simply threw up his arms, indicating he did not know. And at this juncture of the race, this will put him very, very, very far behind your leader. In fact, dropping Wayne possibly to third, fourth, or even fifth position. So the work continues on the front end. Obviously, the front has been bent in some altercation out there. And right now, they're simply using muscle power and some hammers to straighten up the front end of car number 12. Rob?
Thank you, Gary. We appreciate that input. Ronnie Breedlove now has, I believe, moved into second position. He closed while Arnold was in the pit area once before. He's done so again, and Wayne still sitting down there. That moves Lonnie Breedlove now into second position, and it tends to strengthen Kenny St. John's position and probably would be greater inducement for St. John to kind of back off just a little bit, relax, and take it easy, at least to a greater extent than he has so far this evening. However, you can't argue with success. A little over 400 laps now complete. Lap number 403 just circumnavigated by Kenny St. John in car number 1. 2 hours and 22 minutes of racing. down and about 48 minutes, or rather 38 minutes yet to go.
Well, Rob, with about 30 minutes or a little more to go, of course, St. John, the leader, Arnold and Breedlove look like the two people who eventually will be going at it for second place. That is, if Arnold can get back out again. The red flag comes out now with Breedlove running in second position. In fourth position at this juncture of the race is the Chuck Hall Dennis Pace team. Ray Gaddis is in fifth. From 6th through 10th, we have some unofficial positions for you. Dave Grayson certainly has to be close to the number 6 position in the car numbered 8. Grayson was one of the original starters and has had a fairly consistent run throughout most of the evening. Also up in the top 10, and we cannot give you even an unofficial rundown other than to say that in addition to Grayson, the Gary Early Ray Holman team of number 09 certainly has to be among them. Luby Allen, who was the first added starter to this field, has run fairly well ever since he joined the race about 20 or 25 laps into it. And then the number 54 team of Bob Stute and Dave Miller, another one of those Detroit area teams. So those 4 cars, in addition to Ray Gaddis in 779, Chuck Hall and Pace in 5, Breedlove in 0, Arnold in 12, and St. John, the leader, are among the top 10.
Green once again. Not only are they close in scoring, but they're also right together on the racetrack. Wayne Arnold, as has been the case each time he's emerged from the pits, really flying once more. But again, with all of the misfortune that has befallen him, he's got a number of laps to make up just to get into reasonable contention with your front runners. Kenny St. John, who's had a relatively risk-free and uneventful race to date. Obviously, in any race of this duration and this kind of racing action with so many trips through the crossover, opportunity for trouble is going to rear its head with a great deal of frequency, but probably less than any other driver in the case of Kenny St. John.
Rob, just to give everybody a little more of the flavor of this event and what's going on, the last few minutes we've been trying to get a rundown of all the competitors that are still out on the racetrack. My senses would have told me that the number would have been solidified, that just about everybody out on the racetrack was probably in a pace that would take them home. But what we find out is we've had up to 30 cars, 30 different cars on the racetrack in the last 5 or 10 minutes of green flag. At any one time, we've had no more than 20, but up to 30 different ones. So a lot of people are coming and going. It's the old revolving door as competitors come onto the racetrack, pull off, make the repairs, and then come back on. We mentioned, of course, the top 9 cars on the speedway. Another driver, Jack Dandy, in car number 4A, has been in and out all night long. He's back onto the racetrack in a car that has a bobtail on it right now. Looks like a rabbit that somebody has bit off the tail on. Practically nothing left of the tail end of the race car. What I'd like to know is, where is the gas tank? Remember, he lost the gas tank earlier in the night, and now that car is shortened right to the rear axle, and I think the gas tank has simply been stuffed in the rear window.
Well, that's exactly right, Larry. It's protruding from the rear window of that race car. And that has to be one of the strangest looking race machines I've ever seen. You're talking about drivers coming in and going out. That's exactly what's been happening. Donnie Garrigus is back on the racetrack in car number 43 after a long absence. A couple more cars getting together. It was the car of Luby Allen who'd been running up near the front, and now Jim Tunney spinning right into him. Also, Dave Grayson has gone into the pit area. Car number 8, who was running so uneventfully up in the top 10. Grayson went into the pits with a flat tire. We expect to see car number 4 coming back out, or car number 8 coming back out, rather, but he's been in for an extended period of time. The action continues to be furious on the crossover, and this is the point in the race where the senses really begin to get numb, and reaction time gets very difficult, as Gary Lee and Jim Fox were talking about just a few minutes ago. I would imagine everything almost seems to go in slow motion, and it's kind of hard to respond to the inputs that confront you on the racetrack. But that's exactly what the drivers are being compelled to do. Larry still going at it on the racetrack. The black Corvette, car number 1, the orange Corvette car number 12 of Wayne Arnold. In spite of the fact that probably 20 laps or more separates those two machines, they continue to dice just like a couple of kids on the racetrack, running right together and continuing to challenge one another. And it has to be just a game that they've played all year long, and that is which one of us is going to win the race. And the same thing is held true tonight. However, because of the long period of time that St. John has spent, or that Arnold has spent in the pit area, that's definitely moved Lonnie Breedlove in a position to threaten that dynamic duo.
Well, you know, Rob, as we look at the number 22 race car, one of the late entries into this field, make that the number 11 race car, 11R, one of the late entries, David Rodriguez Jr., who had a minor collision at the crossover, took a pretty good blow to the tail section, is now sitting sideways just near the entry to turn number 1. I was about to comment that it's almost hard to believe that St. John has been able to go as long as he has and nothing occurred, Rob. You think back on this race and absolutely nothing has thwarted St. John's drive toward the finish. The question is, can he go on the entire race with no collisions, no flat tires under a green flag situation, and no overheating of the engine as some of the other competitors have had? Is that car perfectly set up? Is there a chink in the armor? Can the king be dethroned? He has gone 400 laps now, and nothing, absolutely nothing, has challenged that team.
Well, the first half of the 1981 racing season, Kenny St. John admittedly was a difficult man to talk to. He was very unhappy with the performance of his race car. I have to feel he was a little bit unhappy with himself. In fact, he was concerned that he didn't get any more attention than he did by us in the press box. Well, it was pretty hard to laud anything over Kenny St. John the way Wayne Arnold was dominating the racing season here at the Speedrome. In the latter half of the year, however, Dave Dayton and his shops helped Kenny St. John go to work on that Dayton automobile. They got it dialed in and running up to par, and Kenny St. John has been a different guy in terms of personality the last half of this season. When he's run out in front, he's been in a much better humor, and it's obvious why that would be. Well, tonight it's all Kenny St. John, and the question remains, I think you put it very succinctly, Larry, when you said, is there a chink in the armor? So far in this race, we haven't seen one. The guy has led more laps, probably competed in more laps in this racing event than any driver in the 5-year history of the race. And it continues to be Kenny St. John. Now, the unofficial rundown after 404 laps put St. John out in front with 404. Second was Lonnie Breedlove with 382. Third with 381 was car number 12, Wayne Arnold. Fourth, car number 5, the Chuck Hall Dennis Pace car with 375. Fifth position, 779, that's the vehicle of Ray Gaddis. Ray had completed 359 laps. Sixth was car number 54, the Bob Stute Dave Miller car with 358, just one lap down to Gaddis. In seventh was number 8, Dave Grayson with 340. In eighth position, car number 09, Gary Early with 321. Ninth was Luby Allen in a 60 with 281. And 10th was car number 4, Bill Fraser with 279 laps. Almost 125 laps separating your leader, Kenny St. John, from the 10th place automobile, Bill Fraser.
And on the racetrack, Wayne Arnold has just passed Lonnie Breedlove, putting him on the same lap with Breedlove. So Arnold in the bright orange number 12 and Breedlove in the silver number 0 are now on the same lap, and Arnold will attempt to get all the way around this racetrack and pass Breedlove one more time to move into the runner-up position. In addition to the cars that Rob Albright just ran down for you, running in the top 10, still on the racetrack in car 57, Bill Tunney Jr. Tunney was one of the added starters and is significantly down in the standings. The number 36 car of Mike Klein continues to motor around. 4A, Jack Dandy, who has been in and out of the top 10, but had all sorts of problems all night long. Out on the racetrack, briefly, we see that Dandy is missing once again, perhaps back in the pits trying to make, again, repairs to that gas tank that's been causing him problems all night long. Car number 09, the Gary Early Ray Holman team, continues on the racetrack as we have 2 or 3 cars come together. In turn number 1, the yellow flag flies. It actually is a broken axle from car number 711, one of the few remaining cars from the qualifiers, 45th and on back, Mitch Reno, car number 711, has broken an axle, and we have a collision coming out of turn number 4. Lots of smoke. One of the competitors stays on the throttle and lays a bit of rubber down like a drag racer. It's Gary Hester in car number 63. Hester getting connected with 2 or 3 other drivers coming out of the 4th turn on the figure 8 course. And never really getting out of the throttle. He's backing it again and back at racing speed.
We're 5/6 of the way complete. Lap number 430 now has been completed by your leader, Kenny St. John. 2 hours, 31 and a half minutes complete at the 2-hour, 30-minute mark. Kenny St. John had completed 426 laps. At that pace, by the conclusion of this race, some 3 hours after the green flag, Kenny St. John would have completed 511 laps. Not only smashing the existing one-lap track record, but Kenny St. John well on his way to obliterating the 3-hour endurance race record. Remember, that is presently at 478 laps, which was established by St. John last year in 1980.
Well, Rob, the race that'll be coming up, and if my just eyeballed calculations are even close, coming up within about 15 laps on the course, is going to be a battle for second between Wayne Arnold in car number 12 and Lonnie Breedlove in car number 0. After all these laps, some 400 odd plus for those two drivers, about 380 plus. They are on the same lap. They'll be doing a joust for the number 2 position, the runner-up spot in this 3-hour endurance race. And I'll tell you, Arnold is coming on like gangbusters again for about the umpteenth time in this race. Wayne Arnold has probably passed more cars than any other competitor in the 380 laps that he has run, in the 400 laps that the leader Kenny St. John has run. Arnold, incidentally, is right now on Kenny St. John's rear bumper. He is about an 1/8 of a lap behind Lonnie Breedlove, and it's really unlikely that Arnold knows that he is exactly on the same lap with Breedlove. All he knows is that he's several laps down. He's driving as hard as he can to try and improve his position, and unbeknownst to him, he's just about ready to improve that position, and it'll be an expensive improvement for Lonnie Breedlove. Here comes Arnold. Rob, he was much quicker than I anticipated. It's only been about 4 laps.
We certainly don't want to wish any bad luck on Kenny St. John, but boy, doesn't that make things interesting if, in fact, something should happen to car number 1. We could have a real battle for the win between Wayne Arnold and Lonnie Breedlove, and Arnold has just sailed by Breedlove as if number 0 weren't even there to take over the number 2 position. Breedlove nearly gets slammed in the crossover that time through, but he has dropped back now very quickly, a straightaway down to Wayne Arnold. Breedlove has had relatively few problems when you compare them to what's happened to Wayne Arnold in this racing evening, and it's kind of surprising that a similarly built car, in fact, Larry, underneath the racing skin, these machines are essentially identical. The front 3 running cars, 3 Dave Dayton prepared automobiles. Dave calls his car
And
Speedrun.
Breedlove has a significant collision at the intersection, a very hard crash. Lonnie Breedlove driving into the side of another competitor, the right side or passenger side door being ripped right off, and Breedlove's night, I'm sure, is going to be over. The other competitor, whose number we cannot identify yet, Rob, I don't know if you can pick up on it or not, was sitting at a stop at the crossroads of America there, and Breedlove came blasting through. He got caught between a couple of other competitors, and it was not a head-on collision, but a very significant thud.
That was car number 76, the machine of Dave Sensney. And now the paramedics come to the scene. Dave may need a little bit of medical help down there. Lonnie Breedlove put his helmet down in his hands after he collided with Sensney, apparently in a gesture of disbelief and unhappiness rather than of pain. It looks like Lonnie Breedlove is okay, but the driver now who's getting the attention down in the infield area is Dave Sensney, who drives car number 76. 2 hours, 34 minutes and 22 seconds complete. A little less than a half hour yet remaining for your leader. They continue to work now over Dave Sensney in car number 76.
Keep in mind that at full throttle and full acceleration coming off of these semi-bank turns and heading for the crossover in the center of this racetrack, speeds probably reach 60 to 65 miles an hour, and even though Cessna was not moving, meaning it was a 65-mile-an-hour crash, that was every bit of a 65-mile-per-hour crash, as Breedlove was trying to thread the needle between several other competitors, and Cessna just happened to be in the absolute wrong place for Lonnie. Lonnie had nowhere to go, and maybe he took his attention away just for a momentary second as he looked to both the right and the left to try and work his way through traffic, and all of a sudden Cessna was right there in the path, and Breedlove collided quite significantly, and as you can see, Cessna is yet to be removed from the race car.
Well, Dave Cessna now still sitting in the crossover. The 25-year-old driver hails from Lawrence, Indiana, suburban Indianapolis community. They continue to work in that car. I talked with those paramedics earlier in the racing season. And Larry, I think it's significant to point out the strides that medical science has made with regard to racing-related accidents, where it used to be imperative that the crews, or the crews at least felt it imperative, to get a driver out of the car immediately. Unless there's fire danger of some kind, anymore they tend to rather wait and to isolate the injury to make sure they don't cause any further damage, as would be the case in a back or a neck injury of some sort. And that's exactly what they're doing now on the Cessna automobile, being very, very cautious and careful not to aggravate any injury he may have sustained. Well, Gary Lee now is down at the site of the accident, and just as soon as we can give you a report on Dave's condition, we'll be sure and let you know. They continue to work over him. We have definitely seen a shrinking of our field in the last 10 to 15 minutes. We no longer have 24 race cars on the racetrack, and I would have to assume that we won't see too many more that are currently in the pit area rejoining this race. We're down to about currently 14 or 15 cars on the track, and again, as has happened for the last hour or so, we'll see some depart and some come back on. But I think realistically, this is probably about the size of field, Larry, that we're going to finish this race with.
And Rob, you know, it's that size of field and the way they're spread out that we described a little earlier as the real dangerous kind of figure-8 racing field. The field is spread out just enough that those who still have some speed left are at maximum speed. But there really aren't any big breaks in the action. But what we have are a lot of people going very fast, but still enough cars in the racetrack that there are regular interceptions at the intersection. And I'll tell you, I do believe that this is the most dangerous kind of figure-8 field that really you can have.
more machines moving back into the race itself. Donnie Garrigus back on the track in car number 43. Also Bruce McFall in 93. One of those near misses that you just talked about, Ray Gaddis in 779. The Bob Stute car number 54 nearly coming together in the crossover, and that's a pair of our real front runners.
You know, Gaddis is a guy that I've been watching most of this night, Rob, and I've been very impressed, really, with his performance. He wasn't one of the fastest cars in this field. He just barely got in the initial field. He was the 23rd fastest qualifier, but he's been driving a heady race. He's been running strong. He hasn't taken a whole lot of extra chances, but his consistency is really going to pay off for him in the end. He is en route to at least a 5th place finish and maybe even a 4th place finish if he can complete enough laps to get himself around Lonnie Breedlove before this race comes to a halt in some 24 minutes from now.
Your leader, Kenny St. John, completing lap number 444. If you want to equate the lead to minutes, about a 6.5-minute lead. Now, what that could mean near the end of this race, Larry, is that if we get down to 4 or 5 minutes to go, Kenny St. John could almost pull into the pit area, stop, get out of his car, stretch his legs a bit, drink a Coke, and watch the finish of the race and still win it. I don't know of any other racetrack where that could happen.
Well, I'll tell you, that would certainly be an ironic finish to a 3-hour race, and almost something I think I'd like to see, just to say that I was there when it happened.
Well, now Bob Stute, car number 5, has completed enough laps to go around the disabled machine of Lonnie Breedlove. Of course, Lonnie tangling with the injured Dave Sensney, sidelining him for the rest of the race after he had run very strongly for 415 laps. Now car number 5, Bob Stute, has completed 416 laps.
The leading contender right now for Rookie of the Race laurels has got to be Gary Early in the car number 09. Early was part of that Detroit contingent that drove down to the Indianapolis area for this race. South Rockwood, Michigan is the listed home of Gary Early. Not one of the names that has been prominent in figure 8 racing for the past 10 years like the names of Libby Allen and Hall have been, but Early has made a good account of himself here tonight. Their race has not been without peril, but each time Early and his relief driver Ray Holman have rebounded from adversity, and they continue to run at racing speed here in the final stages of this 3-hour endurance contest. We've talked about the 3 cars that have dominated this race quite a number of times tonight, and about the fact that they were constructed by a former racing great himself, Dave Dayton, a man who won many races in his familiar blue and white number 87 on the ARCA Trail. Dave Dayton, and right now Dave Dayton, the former racing great and now race builder great, is in the pit area with Gary Lee.
You've won so many races. Do you still get the same type of pride when you see one of the cars that you have built by hand go out there and do so well?
Oh, yes, it's a thrill. It's a great thrill. Kenny and Wayne and Lonnie and Steve, the guys running my race cars, are doing a tremendous job. They're good mechanics, good drivers, and it's a pleasure to build race cars for people such as these.
Can you tell us how the chassis is set up for the figure 8 course as opposed to racing straight ovals?
Well, I'm real fortunate. I have a very simple race car, and we don't change the setup from oval to figure 8. The race car is set square and flat and level in every way, and it happens to run fast both in a circle and figure 8. And it really makes a great figure 8 car because it'll turn both directions. Many of the cars will go fast to the left, but not right and left. And the way our race car is constructed and designed, it happens to turn as good either way.
With the success that these cars have like to go back out and run the figure eight sometime when you see these guys out here?
No, I was never very good in the figure eight, but I do test the cars out here on the oval and really enjoy it. And I've been in Kenny's, I've been in Wayne's, been in Steve's. I haven't been in Lonnie's, but I've been in most of the cars, and I really enjoy just testing.
A premier driver before he retired from the next aspect of the competition, and now a premier race car builder, Dave Dayton.
Dave Dayton, a two-time former national champion with ARCA and a man who's in the top 5 of all-time wins in ARCA Grand National competition. The builder of the 3 cars that have really dominated this event and the 2 cars that are running in the top 2 positions as we come down, now approaching the final 20 minutes of this 3-hour enduro.
Kenny St. John now beginning to ease off the throttle just a bit. The last time, or in fact the last half dozen times around the racetrack, is laps averaging somewhere around 23 seconds. Meanwhile, Wayne Arnold continuing to try to blitz the racetrack in the 18 to 19 second range. So it's still Kenny St. John out in front. His margin now 20 laps over the second place car number 12 of Wayne Arnold. 2 hours and 42 minutes. We're into our final 20 minutes of this race as we now begin to watch the clock and count it down to the finish. Less than 18 minutes remaining for your leader, Kenny St. John. He's definitely off his blistering pace of earlier in the race, but still running very, very quickly. He needs only 28 more laps to set, or in fact 18 more laps at this point, to set a new race record in terms of number of laps completed in our 3-hour endurance race. "32 years, a racing veteran of the Speedrome and the father of the driver who has been dominant in 1981, presently second in this event. Standing now pit side with Gary Lee is Billy Arnold."
Billy Arnold is the name synonymous. Billy, is it easier to race yourself or watch the sun race?
Well, it's really harder for me to watch him because, you know, I worry about him more than people think, you know. A lot of people think I ain't got a heart, but I've got a heart, and I can drive with any man really out here, but I haven't got the equipment. But I'm going to come back next year, and I needed this year, really this season, to get me back in shape and physical, and also get caught up on my cars, and I will be back running strong next year.
With Wayne watching you drive for so many years, was there ever any doubt as a youngster that he would race here?
Oh yeah, I know he'd be on a great chair because he got the start that I didn't get. I gave him the best. When I started, I had just anything I could take, and I give Wayne the best from the start, and he got a good start in racing, and he's got no reason not to be the best.
He is taking a ride next week for the second time in his career in a midget. Do I recall a number of years ago that you were in a midget out here?
Well, I've run sprint cars, but on this track here even, but no midgets, no.
You were in the race earlier this evening. What happened to the car?
Well, I was going all right, and there's a bumper fell off the car and knocked all the lines out of my car. But come back to that midget, it worries me an awful lot to see Wayne get into a midget. You know, because I worry about him, you know.
You're going to worry more next Saturday than this evening.
I will be worried more next Saturday.
Thank you for your time. Billy Arnold talking about son Wayne, who is secondly in second position.
Well, not only one of the most successful drivers, but certainly one of the most legendary drivers in himself, Billy Arnold, the father of the man who is running in second position in this race, Wayne Arnold right now. Arnold is chasing Kenny St. John, but unless something happens to the St. John machine, his pursuit is likely to be one that won't bring any fruits of victory tonight, because only 15 minutes remain in this event, and Kenny St. John has an approximate 20-lap lead over the second running Wayne Arnold.
It's a substantial lead if we think about it. Talking in terms of 3 hours of racing, that's an awfully long time, and By contrast, 15 minutes, the amount of time that remains, seems like a very short period of time. But Larry, that's time enough almost for a driver to complete another 35 to 40 laps. And in 35 to 40 laps, he still must make his way safely through the crossover and wend his way around the track at least 40 more times. And that subjects him to all kinds of potential hazards and problems. And again, as we've pointed out so many times, you get down to the end of the race and the mind begins to wander. Kenny St. John last year at this point in the race still seemed to be relatively fresh, but who knows how he's feeling at this point. Although we said he was traveling around the racetrack at about 23 seconds, he's picked up the pace to his former level and is now running at about an 18 to 19 second clip. So looking at the fact that he's been in that car for 2 hours and 45 minutes of racing time, the racing surface has taken a lot of abuse. Kenny St. John continuing to go hard in car number 1.
Though St. John has been in the car for about 2 hours and 45 minutes of green flag, it's actually approaching 4 hours that he has been belted in that racing machine. Remember, racing machines are not built to be comfortable. They're built to keep a driver erect and alert. And they aren't a comfortable thing to sit in. And, of course, when a car has been running as long as Kenny St. John's car has, at racing speed, it also overheats. And it can't be comfortable in the cockpit of that race car, but perhaps he has an opportunity every once in a while to glance up at the scoreboard, which towers above this racetrack. And if so, perhaps St. John can see the limited number of minutes that remain in this race, and that'll be enough to encourage him to bring it on home.
In another 3 laps, Kenny St. John will eclipse the old 3-hour endurance race track record, that of completing 478 laps. He just passed the start-finish line, completing lap number 476, has just 24 circuits to go to hit 500. A lot of people thought it was possible. Many others didn't think so. Tonight, Kenny St. John proving that it is definitely possible. He's slowed way down now, taking his time to go safely through the crossover, and Wayne Arnold closes on him once again. And let's watch and see what happens, Larry. All night long, we've seen that when these two cars get together on the racetrack, they duel with one another, regardless of the distance separating them. Arnold goes around St. John, and now that puts him unofficially 19 laps instead of 20 down. But St. John now continues to press on in quest of his 4th consecutive 3-hour endurance race victory. And to me, that's almost tantamount to winning 4 consecutive Indianapolis 500s. The odds against you doing it, regardless of the quality of your equipment, have to be astronomically high.
It's also quite ironic, as we get down now with about 10 minutes to go, that the first 3 cars in the race are on the track together, Rob. The leader is the 3rd one in line, the number 1 car of Kenny St. John. In second position is Arnold in the bright orange number 12, and third in the race is the number 5 car, which has been driven by Chuck Hall and Dennis Pace all night, and they continue now to race. They're still together, despite the fact that some 20 or 30 laps actually separate the 3 of them.
480 complete. Kenny St. John has bypassed the old 3-hour endurance race record, and now the only real obstacle between himself and a 4th victory, 10 minutes of racing. With an approximately 6-minute lead, really Kenny St. John needs to worry about the next 4 or 5 minutes. If he can survive that, he can just about park it and still be the victor. I'm sure St. John, however, doesn't want to win this one that way. He wants to run it all the way to the checkered flag and take it going away from the 2nd and 3rd place automobiles. I didn't think, Larry, really, at the time that Gary Lee mentioned the problems that Wayne Arnold was encountering, that being a broken valve spring and the broken distributor cap, I really didn't think we'd see him around at this point in the race, but he's persisted. His crew has helped him, despite the fact that things have really not gone his way tonight. Quite unlike most of the rest of the 1981 racing season, this crew has not given up. They've stayed right in there pitching, and in spite of being 20 laps down, Wayne Arnold continues to drive as if it's the early stages of this race.
Well, he's been puffing more smoke than an Indian chief sending smoke signals and trying to reproduce the New York Times, but it certainly hasn't seemed to have affected the performance when the car was out on the racetrack. The number 12 of Wayne Arnold continuing to rocket around the approximate 1/3 mile figure eight course here at the Indianapolis Speedrome. He's doing battle right now with Chuck Hall in car number 5. At least we believe it to be Chuck Hall. Dennis Pace, the relief driver, has spent most of the time behind the wheel of that car throughout the event here, the 3 hours of the endurance race. But right now, the third place and the second place car are making it look like this race has just begun. They're battling tooth and nail. The number 5 out of Toledo, Ohio, of Chuck Hall. We believe it's Chuck behind the wheel, and the number 12 of Wayne Arnold. With less than 10 minutes to go now, we might be interested to hear from, it might be interesting, that is to say, to hear from Jerry Lee, who's been with these competitors all night. He's seen them come into the pits after their 20 or 30 laps of green flag. Incidentally, we have had 17 red flags tonight. Gary, how about it?
Well, you can bet right now that Kenny St. John is talking to himself, and he's talking to car number 1, because at this point in the race, despite the fact he's had a certain rhythm all throughout the competition, the heartbeat begins to quicken just a bit. In fact, at times, breathing can be more difficult. The excitement builds in the cockpit because Kenny knows that despite the fact things have gone so well this evening, any number of things can happen in the last 8 minutes. So right now he is hearing every squeak, every noise that car has to offer up, thinking at any moment something could break and spoil victory number 4.
Kenny St. John continuing to motor around the Indianapolis Speedrome. The pace has been cut considerably. St. John with a big decision as he blasts his way through the crossover, moving to within about 5 or 6 feet of some competitors coming from the south headed north, and St. John was headed in the other direction. One of our top 4 cars, the number 779 of Ray Gaddis, has gotten hung up with another one of our top 5, another one of our top 10 drivers, Bob Stute. Stute and Gaddis come together, but they once again pick up the throttle and get back up to speed without losing too much time on the racetrack at all.
Earlier in the race, in fact, the last red flag at 438 laps, only one lap separated those two drivers who just tangled in the crossover. I'm not sure the gap now between them, but at 438 laps, they were extremely close together. It has widened now to 5 laps between them, with car number 54 apparently running a little bit quicker than Gaddis's number 779. But we're down now in the very final stages of this race. Less than 7 minutes remaining for Kenny St. John. And I would imagine that as he looks up at the scoreboard, and he has an opportunity to do that only briefly, that he can see that he's just got a few minutes to go. And this is the time where you hear every noise, and probably the last 7 minutes will seem like 70 to Kenny St. John. Just another couple of dozen trips around the racetrack, and victory number 4 in a row will belong to Kenny St. John.
You know, after an event like this, Rob, I'm sure it's like getting back on dry land after having been on rough water for 3 or 4 hours. It's going to take these drivers a few minutes to get their land legs back again, because not only are they making this crisscross in the center of the racetrack, but remember, they've been going around in circles, literally, for the last 4 hours. Though it's been 3 hours on the clock, it's been actually about 4 hours since this race began. Imagine there's even a certain level of dizziness that might even come about as you get down to the final stages of the race. Just another one of those other factors that has a tendency to pull away that concentration that is all so important, particularly as we get down to the final 5, 6, 7 minutes of the race. Everybody who has come this far, of course, wants to do their best to bring her on home safely. You see a little more caution being taken from time to time of the crossover by some of the competitors. At this point, we've got 3 of them stopped, Donnie Garrigus being one of them, as he almost gingerly creeps across the crossover, moves his car to the inside of one of the turns. It's actually turn number 3 on the figure 8 course. And now he thinks the better of it, darts across the racetrack and returns to the pits. Donnie Garrigus, certainly among the top 20. He's been out there most of the night at racing speed, back in the pit area.
Kenny St. John now crosses the start-finish line, this time for the 499th time. The next time by Carl Hall, the flagman at the Speedrome. He will have completed lap number 500. We're down inside the final 5 minutes of racing. You racing fans in the grandstand, help us count down the final 10 seconds of this one once we get there, which is only a couple of minutes away.
St. John crosses the stripe, the start-finish line, completing 500 laps and collecting his $5,000 of the night. That is, if he should win this event. And at this point, Rob, as you've commented so many times, he has at least a 5 or 6 minute lead. So St. John looks like that he is the winner of this event, even though we've still got officially 4 minutes to go. He will win over $5,000 tonight for his 3-hour victory in the 1981 National Figure 8 Endurance Contest.
We've been told that Kenny St. John has a two-way radio in his car. What would you do, Larry Nuber, if your crew whispered in your ear at this point, come on in, you're far enough ahead, you can quit and still win it? What would you do, and what do you think Kenny St. John would do?
If I were convinced that I had enough of a lead, that I had just won the race, for effect, I'd pull in. But I'm not a racer. Kenny St. John is, and I got a feeling he's going to take it all the way to the finish. He wants to see the checkered flag come out with him on the racetrack and whooping everybody while he's there.
3 minutes remaining. 2 hours and 57 minutes and 3 hours have been completed. 503 laps down for your leader, Kenny St. John. Just a few more times around the oval or the figure 8 course, and he will savor victory one more time. Will Kenny do it number 5? Who knows? We'll have to wait until next season to have that question resolved. I can tell you one thing, Wayne Arnold will be coming back fast and furious 2 weeks from tonight when he goes after Kenny St. John in the Indiana Short Track Championships here at the Speedrome on the oval. Both of these drivers, Larry, have told me that they've compromised the chassis setups of these cars, that they're designed to turn right as well as to turn left. But approaching the end of the racing season, they may make some changes in these cars for the oval that could let us see a new oval track record. These two machines have exchanged that record all season long. So I'll be looking forward to seeing them and their assault on the oval track record. Maybe they'll devastate it the way they have every racing record in tonight's 3-hour figure 8 endurance race.
St. John on an approximate 515 lap pace. It already is a new track record for laps completed for this 3-hour endurance contest. This is the 5th of these 3-hour endurance races that have been held. St. John has just won the 4th of the 5. Only the inaugural event back in 1977 was won by Jim Fox. He's the only other driver to see victory lane, and tonight it was a smashing victory for St. John. He didn't back into this one at all, that's for certain. He has been the toast of the town all night long, a brand new track record in qualifying. What must seem an eternity to him, about 12 hours ago probably, when he first made his way to this racetrack today to set his qualifying time. He set a brand new track record. He was a second, and St. John is still having close calls at the intersection, that time going by in front of one of the competitors who, matter of fact, the last guy out on the racetrack, Phil Lynch, who is still out there, the 57th fastest qualifier, just barely sneaking past St. John, or perhaps with St. John sneaking by him. But it has been all Dick St. John, and we are now less than a minute, Rob.
About 30 seconds remaining. Kenny St. John completes lap number 510. It looks like you'll get to just about 5:12 before we see the drop of the checkered flag. Carl Hall continuing to display the yellow as he has for the last 10 minutes or so. Less than 20 seconds remaining. When we get to 10, help us count Kenny St. John down to the win. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 3 hours of racing, 511 laps complete. The checkered flag to the driver of car number 1, the Bamboo Inn Payless Liquors Corvette of Kenny St. John. Victory is his. The sweet taste of victory yet another time. 511 laps, $5,110 to the winner tonight, Kenny St. John. After having completed 478 laps last year, who would have believed that we would see this kind of astronomical jump in total number of laps completed. It was a practically uneventful night for Kenny St. John. Everything went his way all evening long, and he is tonight's winner.
To tell you how perfect the night was, Rob, I don't know if you caught it or not, but just as the clock counted down to 3 hours exactly, St. John crossed the finish line at that very second. It was really incredible. Do you think he planned it that way, that he knew he was going to go 512 laps and cross the finish line right at that mark?
Well, when you're planning the race in advance, I'm sure if you were to lay out all the details of exactly how you'd want it to go, that's one of the crowning touches that you would put in your script. And almost soap opera fashion has been the entire day for Kenny St. John. He was the very first qualifier of the afternoon. He established a new track record immediately, pretty well parked the car till the end of qualifications, and then made a final run at his own track record. Wasn't successful at that, but tonight, now Kenny St. John and the entire crew absolutely ebullient as they make their way around the racetrack on a victory lap. You've got to give credit, however, to the driver of car number 12. Wayne Arnold gave it a good shot in his automobile. He had mechanical problems that kept him out, but the night tonight belongs to Kenny St. John.
Finishing second unofficially in the race will be Wayne Arnold. We are going to assume that certainly Chuck Hall and Dennis Pace, that team, came home in third position, certainly having enough time to eclipse the number of laps that Lonnie Breedlove had recorded before Lonnie went out of the race with a very late race crash. Gary, take her away.
Well, the racing stock in Dayton Racing Enterprises just went up. The congratulations for 4 straight. Our congratulations to Kenny St. John. And I tell you what, you have got to be pooped.
It's hard on a fat man, I tell you that. When they put that big money up, we're ready to answer the bell, though.
About 2.5 hours into the race during a red light situation, we saw some extra padding go in under the left shoulder. What was the problem there?
Just the back was giving out a little bit, and I wasn't about to get out when we got that close, so we just padded the seat up a little bit, and everything worked out real good. Had a real good race. I'd like to dedicate this race to a friend of mine that died a couple weeks. His name's Howard Brooks. He'd have been here, but unfortunately it didn't work out that way. I'd like to thank all these people with me, and there's about 25 people that are directly responsible for that win. I'm just a dummy that drives it. You got M&M Automotive and about a dozen out there. Got the Emerson Brothers and Keiths with a checkbook that they never keep closed. Got the Dayton chassis. He got some tricks. Got the Bamboo Inn. Got the Payless Liquors. And the Southside Radiator Company. They all made it possible.
I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to hand you the champagne. You can spray everybody as soon as I get out of the way, all right?
I like to drink it.
Let's hear it for Kenny St. John, 4 in a row, with prize winnings over $5,000, and there goes the champagne. He's not going to drink it. He's going to wear it.